across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back on Monday right here on Talk. Loads to get through this afternoon. We are going to talk about benefits, sickness benefits spiralling under Labour's welfare chaos set to outstrip the minimum wage. I mean, you can't make this nonsense up. Have they learnt nothing? Set to outstrip the minimum wage by 2026 and cost £100 billion by 2030, with £491 million worth of monthly payments to foreign nationals as well. Is somebody not reading the room here, or are they just plain stupid? Tory leader Kemi Badenoch vows urgent reforms to block non-citizens and save the system from collapse. Of course, only half an hour ago, she was part of a government that was also presiding over a growing welfare system. Also this afternoon, Emmanuel Macron's state visit exposes France's failure to stop channel migrants, despite £771 million, of course, in UK funding. Talks with Keir Starmer on a weak one-in, one-out migrant deal face a bit of a backlash. Critics demanding tougher deportation policies to tackle smuggling gangs and the growing crisis. They meet this afternoon. There'll be a press conference with Macron and Starmer around about 3:30. We'll bring you that, or most of it. You'll probably start gnawing your own eyeballs with boredom halfway through. And British pubs, as you've been hearing with Julia, are under threat, with one closing every day this year due to soaring costs. The risk in jobs is nearly 6,000 jobs involved in this. Campaigners are demanding urgent tax cuts and business rate reliefs to save the community staples as government measures fall short of easing pressure. Details to come. There's a load of stuff to get through. As ever, this is what you do. If something's on your mind, something topical that is nagging you, bothering you, and you fancy having a chat, 0344 499 1000. And in particular, on our main question here this afternoon, we'll throw out loads throughout the course of the show, but I want to start with this one. How long can the UK welfare system last? How long can the UK welfare system last? Now, just think about it. You don't really think about it very often if you don't utilise the welfare system in any shape or form. It's just kind of there. You know, you pay your taxes, it goes into the big pot, and then it goes to help people who most need it, etc., and, you know, a few other areas too. But look at these numbers. Just check out some of the numbers involved in this story, and you are genuinely forced to think, where's this going to be in 10 years' time? I just read you those headlines there. The amount that is spent on welfare, sickness benefits alone, will be outstripping the minimum wage in 2 years' time. It's just shy of 2 years' time. So you will earn more money by not going to work. Full sympathy, by the way, if you have a genuine sickness there. And I know sometimes some elements of being ill do cost more because there are other considerations. We all get that. But broadly speaking, if we are going to cost the Exchequer £100 billion by 2030, where does this go next? So living on a sickness benefit will put you 2,500 times per year ahead of somebody who's in a basic minimum wage job. Earnings of the unemployed who claim ill health payments will overtake those workers on the national living wage next year. This is according to the Centre for Social Justice. The think tank has calculated that a claimant on universal credit incapacity benefits who are claiming personal independent payments, that's PIP, for disability and housing benefit, would have an income of $25,000 a year, more than the $22,500 post-tax income of almost 2 million workers on the national living wage. So you look at it like that, you crunch the numbers and go, full sympathy to those who most need. By the way, whenever we talk about this, somebody will always phone up and say, why are you attacking people who are disabled? Or no, that's a given, right? If you have a disability, if you are too sick to work, physically, psychologically, whatever the case is, it's a given. Anyone I know that's half decent will say, yep, I don't mind my taxes going into those areas. The question is, why do we have this extraordinary rise? Remember, listen to these numbers. Listen to these numbers and then answer the question, how long can the UK welfare system last? We have 4.2 million people of working age currently claiming at least one health-related benefit. That's 10.2% of the working age population, a tenth of our country. Now, that's a disturbing figure in itself, no matter where you sit politically or where you come at this. Why have we got 4.2 million people? Over 10% of people are on some kind of health-related benefit. But here's the real kicker in all of this. That figure, just 5 years ago, was 3.2 million. So are we looking at a rise of 1 million every 5 years, 2 million every decade? Now, based on that, the rise in the amount of people, quite seriously, where does that leave the UK welfare system? How the hell do we pay for that? With whose money? With what methodology? With what criteria or system could you possibly have a welfare system that worked without taxing the pants off everyone? We're not talking then about, you know, whether it's 45p top rate or 46p. You'd have to have a top rate of about 65p and growing, because this is getting out of control. If you've got 50% of the population who are on some kind of welfare, dependent on welfare in some shape or form, and that number, I know it differs depending on who you speak to, but and this is just the area of those on a health-related benefit. This doesn't include everything else that goes with it, whether it's maternity, whether it's some kind of other, it might be a temporary benefit that you have. Look, the benefit system is there. It's meant to be a safety net, all right? If you need to utilise it, most people who've paid into the system once in a while go, do you know what, chips are down at the moment, I'm going to need to dip in. It's my insurance policy, if you like, and that's exactly what it is. But there is a suspicion these numbers are so widely out of control that they are just unsustainable. And that's the bit. Kemi Badenoch is right to point out that, you know, we've essentially become I think her words were, we've become a welfare system with an economy bolted onto it. I understand that, and she's not exactly out of the woods on this one, bearing in mind she was in office what seems like half an hour ago, as I always seem to say. So I get it, OK? We understand it. There's a problem. It's massive. How do we solve it? Seriously, how long can the welfare system last? Because it ain't looking good. 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on this from Callum Price, Director of Communications at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Good afternoon to you, Callum.
Good afternoon, how are you doing?
I'm as good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us on this lovely hot summer's day, of course, here in the UK. Let's start with that then. Those on sickness benefits will soon be paid £2,500 more than those working in a minimum wage job. Weren't they meant to cut welfare, of course? That was the idea, but we know it didn't quite work out like that. Let's have a listen to the Chancellor speaking on this very issue. She was very clear back then, just a couple of months ago.
We are investing £1 billion to provide guaranteed, personalised employment support to help people back into work. And £400 million to support the Department for Work and Pensions and our job centres to deliver these changes effectively and fairly, taking total savings after that to the package to £3.4 billion. While spending on disability and sickness benefits will continue to rise, these plans mean that welfare spending as a share of GDP will fall between 2026 and the end of the forecast period, very different to what we inherited from the party opposite.
That's Rachel Reeves in full flow, but of course things took a different turn, Callum, and now they're back where they started and the problem is getting bigger.
It is indeed, and there's two aspects, I think, two broad buckets of problem that we're looking at here. The first is, as you've mentioned, the scale of the cost. I mean, it's just going up and up and up and up and up. Kemi Badenoch, you're right, today has said that we are risk becoming a welfare state with an economy attached. I worry that quite quickly we won't even have that economy attached, at least not a functioning one anyway. And the costs are through the roof, and the numbers, you can find any numbers which way that look utterly awful. 1 in 4 people self-identifying as being disabled, for example, and the cost of those that then kick on. And it is frankly unsustainable. You said what how long does the welfare state last? It's basically which budgets first, the welfare state or the tax base. And by that I mean how long until we have to raise taxes so high that everybody will just quite quickly up sticks and leave. Don't let anybody tell you that the cost of this can be covered by taxing other people. If we're going to get to this point, the OBR released their fiscal sustainability report this week that projects growth debt to be at about 270% of GDP in the next 50 years. Yeah. If that goes in that direction, you can't solve that. You can't close that gap by taxing other people. It has to be taxes on everybody, and significantly higher taxes on everybody. That means raising VAT, doubling income tax. Yeah. This is the scale of the problem we're talking about. So that's the financial side. The other side, which is the more tragic side, is the incentives that you build into the system. You are absolutely right to point out that nobody here is criticising people who genuinely need this money. But also, it may not even be fair to criticise the people who sometimes get billed as scroungers or fraudsters or whatever. And I'm sure there are some people who do just that. But actually, you've got lots of people who just respond to the incentives built into the system. And if we build this incentive into the system, that's staying off work, claiming disability, and if it's easy to get that disability because there's not any in-person meetings, etc., 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 and you're going to get paid more for doing that, then why would you work? So people get trapped in welfare almost through no fault of their own.
But we've had that discussion. Ian Duncan Smith, the whole point of him setting up the organisation that looks into this was because of this, and that was the very problem, and that goes back nearly 2 decades now.
Exactly. It's clearly not an easy problem to solve. Ian Duncan Smith made some really important changes when he was in government.
100%.
To sort of get rid of that disincentive to work, and the government, to their credit, have tried giving some money to sort of help get people back into work. But then you look at the other side of the ledger, the cuts that they've tried to make, the sort of increasing the threshold on which you need to access these benefits in a not disproportionate way. I wouldn't think. Are just knocked down in Parliament, because you basically have politicians who are living in a fantasy land. They think we can just keep going on like this, and that somebody else will maybe solve the problem when they're out of politics.
Indeed. And then we have the other, just to add in, it's not quite fully relevant to the specifics of this subject, but it is to the wider issue. Artificial intelligence, which is hoovering up jobs left, right and centre. British Telecom, 10,000 jobs are likely to go. Microsoft cutting 9,000 jobs. I know that's globally. A big old list of firms that are saying, look, we're just not going to replace these jobs. A decade's time, Callum, you can only imagine that terrain is going to look very, very tricky for whoever's in power.
Well, it may do, and I think actually on the AI front and the technology front, I'm more of an optimist. You can point to 100 examples from history where we've worried about computers or about fax machines or about self-checkout machines and what effect that will have on employment. Actually, a free market, especially in the UK, we have quite a lively labour market, which means that businesses do create jobs elsewhere. What those jobs will probably be doing, frankly, is looking after old people, because that's the bigger problem we have, is our ageing population.
Yeah, I think
that is where
true.
The pressure is going to mount, because pensions, and they demand more from healthcare, etc., etc., etc. That's where the ticking time bomb is, alongside the welfare payments.
Indeed. Let's move to this story, second one on the list here. Just 50 migrants a week to be returned to France after Starmer's much touted deal with Macron. I mean, this is an extraordinary deal to have, well, it looks like it's fallen completely flat. Labour's plan is clearly going to look all shades of embarrassing when it comes to fruition. Oh, look, we might have 50,000 people here this year alone, but don't worry, we've sent 50 of them back to France. I mean, the optics of this are horrendous.
Yeah, it's not great. And look, they have, on one hand, they have much of my sympathy, having worked in the Home Office and try to solve this problem. It's by no means easy, and getting some form of deal with France is an achievement. But yeah, the numbers just don't stack up. 50 migrants being sent back a week. It pales in comparison. It's about 1 in 17 of them coming back. And don't forget, if we're talking about pure numbers, those 51 being sent back will be swapped for 50 others that have family claims here that are currently in France. So the numbers leave a lot to be desired, shall we say. It's not going to be at that scale the deterrent that they need. They got rid of the deterrent by getting rid of the Rwanda scheme when they came into government. they've clearly worked out that actually a deterrent is quite important. So they're trying to get another one. This will have to be scaled up quite dramatically to have the deterrent effect that they want it to. And even then, how much of a deterrent will it be just being sent back across the channel where you started? But there's an argument that being sent to Rwanda to live there, albeit in decent conditions, was a slightly more of a put-off factor.
Yeah, and I was listening to Alexander Downer, the former Australian Foreign Secretary, who was around when they were carving out their deal on illegal migration, the boats going over to Australia. They pretty much stopped it now. It doesn't really happen. The problem has gone away as a result of a fairly robust policy, which, as I'm sure you know, Callum, does involve a third country in terms of people being sent back. It does involve processing in another place. So they worked it out. I know it's not quite an equivalence, but it kind of still resonates. It could still be us.
Yeah, I think that there are lots of sort of quite complicated differences between the two, but you're right. I think my view is that the principle of a third country option is something that isn't going away and may be the route by which this problem does get solved, if indeed it ever does. Yeah. But we hear about America looking at it as well, and also the idea of other negotiations happening around with different countries other than just Rwanda is something that I think people will begin to wake up to.
Yeah.
If mutual agreements can be found, because obviously you need a third country who's willing to do their part as well.
Callum, stay with us. Callum Price is Director of Communications at the IEA. Thank you to him. Over to you shortly as well. That question, I can only really put it like this just to start us off with. How long can the UK welfare system... Where does it go, this story? Literally, what happens in 10 years' time? We've seen a ballooning of people, and this is just health-related benefits. So there's 4.2 million of your fellow Brits claiming some kind of health-related benefit. But only 5 years ago, it was 3.2 million. I mean, the rise is off the scale. And the smart money says it's going to go in the same direction. Where do we get the money from? What literally happens? And I'd also like your experience as well. If you've worked in welfare centres and Department for Work and Pensions in that area in any form, what's been your observation of this growing trend of claimants and what's behind it? 0344 499 1000.
What you have to do as a minister is to sit with a situation where the law is often not particularly clear. You've got to apply the facts to the law, and that's the bit that everybody misunderstands. Law doesn't... You said a minute ago about how the law is not a tablet of stone. That's exactly right. It gives you principles. You have to apply the facts to the principles, but as a minister, you've also got to apply politics and your democratic mandate, and that's what this will stop you doing.
Yeah, and indeed, and the right of a government to, with their majority in Parliament, to change the law.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots to talk about here. Still taking your calls and comments. We'll come to those shortly. Callum Price is with us, Director of Communication at the IEA. Let's get to this story, Callum. The Royal Navy set to house sailors in the Bibby Stockholm. This was meant to be the plague-ridden boat where people die if they go in the same postcode. But apparently the Royal Navy has said it's fine. The same barge, of course, apparently not good enough to hold migrants. Let's have a listen to what Labour think about the Bibby Stockholm and yet how happy they will be to put British sailors in there.
The thing we need to do in relation to asylum seekers is to make sure that we stop people climbing into boats on the northern coast of France.
But what would you do with the barge that's moored off Portland, currently housing a couple of hundred asylum seekers? What would you do with that?
That is evidence of the failure of the government.
The gym that was shown when everyone got to look around has had all the weights and facilities removed. It only now has 2 treadmills and nothing else.
They are using barges, they're using hotels, it's costing the taxpayer an absolute
But would you get rid
fortune.
of it?
We cannot go on like
Would
this.
you get rid of the barge?
And we're going to have to fix that mess. We will do so as quickly as possible to get people out of hotels and off the barges and out of the military camps.
But your shadow immigration minister has previously said he does not agree with the use of barges. We've seen reports of conditions on board, some describing them as prison-like.
The men I met said it felt like living in a prison.
The basketball court, for example, has had the basketball taken away from it because they say it's a risk. So there's no basketball to play.
The Bibby Stockholm must be shut down.
We're not planning to have more barges and more hotels.
So they were pretty clear there, Callum. That's a cross-section, of course, of Labour voices across the spectrum, that the Bibby Stockholm is not fit for purpose, and yet here they are giving the green light to the Royal Navy to lob some sailors in there.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. I'm not sure if it's specifically the Bibby itself or Bibby-style barge, but either way, it's a bit of an indictment of the ability of this country to build anything that it needs. The fact that we can't house people who are serving in the Navy in simple barracks or housing near to where they need to be, so they need to put them on a boat instead, is frankly mental, and is indicative of the wider problems that we have that need to be solved, which is fix our planning system, make it easier to build, make it possible to build for government, essential government services like the Army and the Navy, as well as for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of strange one, isn't it? I know governments and oppositions play that game forever, and when you look at what Labour are doing, 90% of it was either already happening under the Conservatives or continues to happen under Labour from the Conservatives. But you have to play that game in opposition. You have to sort of argue against everything, and yet when you get in the big job, you end up going, well, actually, we'll just keep this as it is.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, going from government to opposition is a painful, a horrible thing, because you lose all the reason that you've sort of were there, all the reason that you were there in the first place to actually do stuff. But it is somewhat liberating in that you've spent the past however many years being attacked from left, right, and centre, and mainly from the opposition on why aren't you doing this? Why don't you just get rid of that? Why can't you do this? And then you watch those people go into the offices that you used to work in and see them quite quickly click that, oh, actually, maybe this isn't as easy as we thought it was. But it's the political game. But people quite quickly click onto the difficulties of governing.
And a final one here, Callum. This, again, feeds into everything around, the cost of running the UK and the cost of living. Energy bills to rise by 50 quid after delays to clean power projects. These were meant to be pretty crucial, these electricity grid projects. But apparently, because of the delay on this, it's going to up the electricity. I mean, is there ever any good news coming to bill payers when it comes to energy?
It feels like not. And again, it's another example of why is it so difficult to build things in the UK on time, on cost. Now, the £50 bill rise is really underlying a point that has already been made by lots of other people, but Ed Miliband's £300 bill cut for decarbonising the grid by 2030, extremely fishy numbers based on extremely optimistic forecasts that didn't measure with independent forecasts about the relative cost of other things, so how much cheaper it would be in comparison, and the ability of the grid to be decarbonised on time and on budget when it never has been before. Infrastructure projects of its scale and size never have been before. Yeah. So this is just one more example of the real life impact on the inability of the country to build anything, and the impacts of those consequences specifically in energy where Britain has a particular problem.
Indeed. Callum, as ever, thank you. Great to have you on. Enjoy the rest of the day. It's hot out there. Slap up on the old lotion, of course. Callum Price, Director of Communications from the IEA. Here's one from Stuart in Perth who says, afternoon, Ian, I fear that as and when they reform the system to prevent the fraudulent claims, they will end up hurting those who do genuinely need the benefit. I'm in the late stages of MS, but if I could have my health back and be working, I'd do it in a heartbeat. For anyone who moans about having to go to work, I'd say imagine the alternative. Yes, imagine. Thank you, Stuart, for that. And I wish you, good health. I'm sure that probably sounds like a ridiculous thing to say after what you've just told us, but you hear what I'm saying sincerely. But if you're in a position where you literally cannot work, and then you meet somebody who doesn't want to work, that chasm, and we can talk about it being offensive, but it's mind-boggling that you could work but don't. There's only one of two ways of looking at this. So all of those additional people, the extra million that in 5 years are now claiming some kind of sickness benefit, is because we legitimately have an extra million sick people. Now, if we have, then the situation becomes even more of a problem because you can't really solve it. Because you want to help people who genuinely need the help. So we've either genuinely got 10.2% of the population that are too sick to work or in receipt of some kind of health-related benefit. 10.2 of the working population. It's over 10%. It's massive. So it's either that or there's some people swinging the lead. Now, we're forever told it's really hard to get a health benefit if you haven't got a health problem. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody else really does, unless you're someone who's tried it when there's nothing wrong with you. You've gone to the doctor, gone through the system, jumped through the hoops, over the hurdles, and managed to get your paycheck. I don't know. If you work in that field, that area, you understand it, then I'm all ears. Anecdotally, we always hear both sides. Somebody going, it took months just to get the basic health-related payment, and then others will say, I filled out a form for a friend online and they got it in a couple of weeks. Where's the truth in that one? No one wants to malign or upset anyone who genuinely needs a health benefit assistance. That's a given. I have to keep saying it because some people don't hear. We understand that bit, but the other bit is who pays for it? Who actually pays? Given that this is a spiralling cost and it's only going one way. It forces the question, how long can the UK welfare system last? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Up North says, I will tell you why benefits gone. It's partly because of migrants, family members or others coming here to live that are not prepared to work and to live on the state. There is that, but the wider problem, though, just to address Carl's point, is that loads of people, a ridiculous and growing amount of people, are working and on benefits, which throws up another kind of economic conundrum in terms of, is this about companies paying more wages? You can't just pay everybody double. That monkeys around with the economy in conventional sense. So what is the answer? How do we identify where the answer is? How long can the UK welfare system actually last? Sickness benefits spiralling out of control. And the curious stat that's come out of this is that sickness benefits will pay £2,500 more than somebody working on minimum wage by 2026, with costs hitting 100 billion by 2030. 100 billion, let that settle for a second. Labour's welfare chaos, of course, has created a 5 billion hole, while 941 million a month goes to foreign nationals. Kemi Badenoch is fighting back, vowing urgent reforms to block non-citizens from claiming and to stop the system from collapsing under soaring costs. In a moment, Will Jones will join us, editor of The Daily Sceptic. First, Tom Pollard, head of social policy at the NEF and former DWP advisor. Afternoon to you, Tom.
Hi, Ian.
This is one of those things that no one has ever solved, right? Everyone says, oh, we're going to solve it. We've got the answer. Ian Duncan Smith had the answer. He kind of, had some interesting ideas. And then Labour said those ideas haven't really worked. Universal credit's a mess. We can change this. We can move things along. We can save money. And then that becomes a mess. And now we end up with headlines that tell us that actually you could be on £2,500 more than somebody on minimum wage. I understand there might be pressing reasons for that. It's a very seductive headline. It could be somebody needs that extra assistance. I get that. However, we can all agree, whatever way you slice this one, Tom, it is chaotic and it's a mess.
Well, I think, to come to your first point, part of the reason why successive governments have struggled to deal with this is because they've tended to focus very heavily on kind of rates and apparent incentives within the benefit system rather than trying to tackle the underlying causes that are leading to people needing that support in the first place. But I think it's really important to pick up this headline today and this reporting about comparing someone out of work because of illness and disability with someone on a minimum wage salary. I mean, the figures they presented are misleading. Someone on a minimum wage full-time salary would also receive support from Universal Credit. They could receive thousands of pounds in support for their housing. So it's not a fair comparison. If someone who was on personal independence payment moved into work, they would continue to receive that personal independence payment. So again, it's not a fair comparison on that front.
But it's a little close, isn't it? I mean, it merely makes the point, even if, whenever I read a headline, you're quite right, Tom, I look at it and think, well, there's probably a bit of mischief involved in putting that together. But I think the overarching point is that the idea that it always pays to work is questionable.
Well, okay, I don't think that is questionable because, in almost every scenario, someone will be better off in work. But then my second question would be, if the state has assessed someone as being too unwell to work and has also assessed that person separately as facing significant additional costs because of illness and disability, how much do we think that person should live on?
Yeah, I agree.
I think a minimum wage salary is a fair,
I said at the beginning, look, there's only one of two ways looking at this. These figures are either horrendously inaccurate and lots of people are lying, or they're accurate, in which case we've really got to have a rethink about how we do welfare, because it's only going upwards. We've got 1 million more people in just 5.5 years who are on some form of health-related benefit. That tells us something's going on, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that's important to bear in mind is that the cost of welfare as a proportion of GDP has not been rising significantly. What we've seen is a shift in the composition towards, as you say, more people struggling because of health and disability. The overall spend has not increased dramatically. The proportion of people claiming for that reason has. And of course, that's worrying. But what should be worrying about that is that lots of people are very unwell, struggling with health conditions and disabilities, and also struggling financially, which is why people then seek that support. And so much of the debate focuses on, are the incentives too high? is it too easy to claim? And not enough of the debate focuses on how do we reduce the number of people who are unwell in the first place, who are falling out of work. And often it's because work is quite poor quality, it's insecure, people aren't well managed at work. And how do we address those underlying causes rather than always thinking we can kind of just suppress the symptoms of what's going on? Time and time again, it fails.
Is there an underlying cause, though, Tom? I mean, I understand the question, but could we do all the investigations we like and conclude, do you know what, there actually isn't? It's just that we've just got lots of people who are particularly have mental health issues, and that's it. We've got to live with that and deal with it.
No, but then we have to think about why do people experience mental health problems, right? So we know that there are really significant social and economic determinants of poor mental health. So people living in poverty are much more likely to experience poor mental health. People living in isolation are much more likely to experience poor mental health. People from kind of minoritized communities, again, are much more likely. So we can look at the underlying causes and we can do things to address that. And what we do know is that there's very strong evidence that what is occurring here is a very real increase in mental health problems in particular, and there is now almost unquestionable evidence that is a genuine rise in poor mental health. It is not down to over-reporting. The most recent adult psychiatric morbidity survey, which is like the kind of gold standard assessment of what's going on in mental health, concluded that categorically. So we have to start talking about the underlying causes.
But is that something a government can do about, do anything about? I mean, do we not expect... I appreciate governments have a role, but I mean, they can't... governments can't create... They can create conditions. They can't suddenly make policy to get everybody out of living in challenging circumstances financially.
Well, they can do a lot to address that. And, some of the things the government has done, are very welcome. So they've been thinking about how do you improve the quality of work, and that is a key part of this puzzle, that lots of people are struggling to work with poor health because the work that's available is poor quality and is not accommodating of their health. But also, we've seen new statistics out today saying that almost 1.7 million children are now affected by the 2-child limit, and we've seen rocketing child poverty in this country. Those children will be much more likely to grow up experiencing mental health problems and other forms of poor health. So we are creating...
But where do you draw the line on that, though? Because, I mean, they're all very seductive stories, Tom, and I get it. But, there's got to be a point when you say, look, the state can't do anything. There's very few countries around the world, as you know, that you could find yourself in comparable economies that you would look at and point to and say are unrecognisably better than what we do in this country.
I think you could point to a whole bunch of countries that would fall into that category.
Unrecognisably better.
Certainly Scandinavian countries that
Yeah, and you pay a higher tax for that, of course.
Pay a higher tax, but then as a result of that, you have a much higher standard of living and a much higher level of happiness and much lower rates of mental health. So we have to get serious about what we want as a country. Do we want to constantly talk about how we're being overtaxed and we can't afford public services, or do we want to create a solid floor that actually saves us all money in the long term? Because having so many people existing on low incomes and existing without adequate public services costs us all money in the long term.
Indeed. Well, you're right on that point, and you're certainly right that if we want to solve some of it, I don't think, but I would disagree that this will wish away all of our problems just with a higher rate of tax, but it would go towards it. Tom, it's always good to have you on. Thank you, Tom Pollard, Head of Social Policy at the NEF and former DWP advisor. Will Jones is with us, editor of the Daily Sceptic. There it is, Will. Let's just move to Sweden and life will be sweet.
Yeah, it's an interesting argument, isn't it? I think we need to remember that the UK is an outlier when it comes to this issue. Sickness benefit, if the IFS looked at this and did an international comparison and found that the UK is the only developed country, the only country that's really experiencing this skyrocketing rates of sickness and disability benefit. And it's all being driven, as has been shown by numerous reports, by a huge increase in mild conditions like depression and anxiety, ADHD, that kind of thing, these mild conditions. So very understandably, the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, and following them, the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, have said that they want to really look at cutting back significantly how much these mild conditions are entitled to benefits. We have to remember that now 1 in 4 working age adults, 1 in 4, a quarter of all working age adults in the UK are now claiming disability benefit of some kind. It's a huge number, and it's been a huge increase since the pandemic. It's really come on since furlough and since that big change in how we approached work and worklessness and the idea of going to work. And it's really UK as an outlier. So it's a problem that's specific to us, and we need a government that's really going to get on top of it. And unfortunately, it doesn't look like that's Keir Starmer's Labour government.
But every time I put that to somebody about things like mild anxiety or whatever, so I always get a call on this, and I genuinely don't know the answer. Well, for somebody will say, you can't get these benefits unless you've can really prove that you've got. So you couldn't just go to the doctor and say, I've got anxiety. The doctor goes, don't worry, I'll recommend you for a dose of PIP, and away you go. I don't know what the truth of that is. I also simultaneously get other people who go, do you know what, I filled out the form for my mate online. Nobody met us, nobody saw us, nobody assessed us, and bingo, we got the lot. I don't know which one is true.
Yeah, I've certainly heard more of the latter stories than the first. I think that there is, it does seem to be very easy to collect and to claim these benefits and to get entitlement for them. Again, we need to come back to the fact that the UK is an outlier. This is something specific to our country. So either the UK is unusually mildly depressed and mildly anxious compared to other countries, or our criteria and our way of assessing these eligibility for these benefits is out of sync with other countries, and is in serious danger of if not bankrupting us, certainly putting a huge pressure on the public finances and sending us, and added to all the other pressures we've got, of course. Putting us making the welfare state unaffordable for those, and this is what we need to remember, unaffordable for those who need it most, those who actually really need it, not who have been signed off with depression but actually would be better off in work, but for the people who really need it. And we need to make sure that the welfare state remains solidly affordable for those who need it, for those who really need to depend on those payouts, those payments, so that, and we need to do that by making sure that we cut back on anything that is making it unaffordable for people who really shouldn't be claiming. And
100%. Where does it go? The question we threw out at the beginning of all of this, Will, was how long could the UK welfare system last? And if you look at the numbers, I mentioned health-related benefits increasing by 1 million people just over 5 years. Over 10% of the workforce are on some kind of sickness-related benefit. And these are just the sickness ones. There's other benefits that are out there as well. There has to be a point when someone's going to look at this where you either do what our previous guest Tom Pollard said and hike everybody's taxes so we all behave like Scandinavia, where they all live, a wonderful, incredible, happy life, apart from their extraordinarily high and disproportionate suicide rates. I didn't get round to mentioning that to him, but that's another story. But broadly speaking, it's either that or we do something else, because this is out of control. And give it 10 years, what's that bill going to look like?
Yeah, absolutely. The OBR has said this week that the sickness bill is going to hit £100 billion by 2030 every year. Of course, that's £100 billion every year just on sickness benefits alone. And a lot of that being driven, as we've been saying, by this huge increase since the pandemic in these mild conditions. So something needs to be done. And with Reform riding high in the polls, we might have hoped that Reform and Nigel Farage would be saying things that would encourage us that they were going to grasp this nettle and do something about it. But actually, as many have noted, they have been veering sharply to the left on these issues, on these economic and welfare issues, and they're promising to go beyond what even the Keir Starmer's Labour government is saying it's going to do, and want to remove the two-child benefit cap. And with the Tories really down in the polls, and the Tories being the only ones who possibly we might be able to rely on to do something about it, although of course people would point out that they had 14 years in power to do something about it, and the state that we're in now is largely a result of the Conservative policies. So it does really feel quite hopeless. The Tories are now making some more positive noises, trying to actually see a weakness in reform, therefore right-wing and conservative and just concerned voters, and making the right noises on that. But it is looking challenging. Let's be honest. There's lots of people, the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, and the Conservative Party, making some suggestions, some proposals now that could start to address that. We've had Kemi also suggesting that sickness and disability benefits are restricted for foreign nationals as well. Another area to look at, people who aren't citizens and with permanent leave to remain of this country, that's another area that could be looked at. But will these steps be taken by those who are likely to be in power, who are in power for the next few years and who are likely to be in power in 2029? That's the question.
It certainly is the question, and it's not going to be dull, the journey, as we get to dissect all of this. Will, always great to get your view on this. Thank you, Will Jones. He again raises what is the ultimate question is, and the only way you could put it, what percentage of people are not legitimate claimants of welfare? So who's trying it on? Out of 10.2% of the workforce, what percentage of those are literally trying, nothing wrong with them at all? Could go to work, won't go to work. What percentage? You might get a shock and discover it's 0.2%, so we've still got 10%. And this is just the sickness stuff. Where does the welfare system go? We know it's not fit for purpose. What is the end game for our welfare system? How can the UK welfare system last? And your stories and responses as to what you're seeing. If you work at or have worked at the DWP, how does this thing work? I mean, I don't believe all of these people are suddenly lying about their benefits. When we see the extraordinary figures that we read out right at the beginning of the programme, that you have welfare costs set to outstrip minimum wage and costing 100 billion. These are sickness benefit costs by 2030. Where do we go? The other figure as well, 941 million monthly payments to 941 million pounds monthly payouts to foreign nationals. Nobody who's a foreign national should get any benefit, right? Surely. I mean, surely you wouldn't get any. You could save £1 billion there. Just go, you're a very nice person. I'm glad you're working here, but you only came half an hour ago, so no, that can't work. Sorry. 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah.
Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
To get a blue badge does take, so there's 2.84 million blue badge holders. Now, you can't just get... I had the classic thing in Tesco the other day where somebody was... What was the car? It was a right tasty old thing. You know, top of the range jobby. But that doesn't mean to say you're not disabled. We often get a comment from somebody go, yeah, I saw this fella, top of the range, Porsche Cayenne or something. Clearly not disabled if he's driving one of that. Well, you can be disabled and drive a nice car. You go disabled and multi-millionaire, of course, so it doesn't preclude that. But the point of raising that is that it feeds into the overarching cost. You've got mental health that is rising. That's the one, isn't it? That's really the one. How do you begin to dissect that without sounding insensitive or going back 10 years into the way people used to view mental, you know, grow a pair, man up, all that kind of stuff. Of course, there's people who are absolutely crippled with mental health issues. There are those that have, you know, more than their fair share of challenging days. But there is a whole other group of people who I think we've kind of learned how to have a mental health condition. I think we've learned it. And that's not in any way to jump on top of the very real stories that I just mentioned. But I think there is another group of people that will genuinely see anxiety, which is called part of living. You know, it's ups and downs, it'll happen, you have a relationship, can be a bit wobbly, you get dumped, that's not good, you lose a job, all of these things. That's just life, right? That's how it's meant to be. It's not meant to be a one-way street, a comfort blanket that goes on forever, where everything is tickety-boo 100% of the time. I think there are a group of people who don't know that, and that when that doesn't happen, they go, I've got a mental health problem. And I think in their world, they do have a mental health. They think they have. But it's just life. How do you... I know I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said 1,000 times. I'm genuinely intrigued. How do you find that difference? How do you prove that difference? And it's become the bad back theory, isn't it? Because you could never prove that somebody didn't have a bad back, which was usually the #1 reason for people trying to claim certain types of benefit. This is Alan in the Wirral. Alan, how are you doing?
Hello, Ian. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. What have you got for us?
Well, first of all, I think your last guest actually made a really good point, but it was in a throwaway comment. He said he thinks that we're assessing things wrongly in this country.
Yeah.
And my story illustrates that. I get PIP because I'm disabled, and I've just had to give back a Motability car because I'm not safe to drive anymore. But my daughter, who's almost 30, is at university, independent, and she was advised by people at uni to apply for PIP because they said, well, if you pass the ADHD test, you'll get PIP.
Wow.
We talked about it, and I said, but you don't have ADHD. I said, yeah, but I might pass the test.
Yes, if I try for the amputee test, I wonder if I'll get some.
Yeah, but then what disturbed me was she said, Dad, I'll be honest on the test. I'll just answer it honestly, but if I get it, it's £3,000 a year to me. And to a student, it's insane. Yeah, so...
Yes, an extra 60 quid a week, right? So you can buy a lot of shots with that.
Yeah, she's given up. She used to work part-time, and she's been able to give that up now because of the PIP she now gets. And this, to me, I have a real moral problem with this. So
yeah.
You don't need this. It's not right. So what that tells me is she promises me she was honest on the test. That tells me the tests are wrong.
Correct.
You know? Yeah. So, you know, she's been misdiagnosed.
And also, if you do have ADHD, you know, there are people... you could have ADHD, but a very mild form of ADHD.
Yes.
Where you wouldn't, a benefit would in no way assist you with it. You know, you could have ADHD that manifests itself in a rather more challenging and crippling way. You know, I know this from experience in my own family.
Yeah, and also, I just wanted to say one thing. I think that the focus that everyone's putting right now on Motability cars, you're looking at the wrong target, because you only get a Motability car if you get the enhanced rate of PIP for mobility.
Yeah.
Now, if we fix the PIP problem, it fixes the mobility problem.
Got it.
Also, we see a lot of talk about people getting expensive cars on mobility.
Mm-hmm.
What people don't seem to understand is that to get a mobility car, if you want a fancy car, you have to put a lot of deposit in. I had no money, so I was driving a basic white 1.0 Kia Picanto. And
so yeah, this idea that you get a top-of-the-range BMW, you have to pay the addition yourself for that, right?
Yeah, you got to put in like 10 grand deposit if you want a decent car. Look, it's still cheap.
Yeah.
It's still cheap, but you have to, if you want a decent car, you've got to put in up to 10 grand deposit.
And am I right in saying on this, Alan, that if you want to go down that route of having a car, then you have it instead of having the benefit?
Correct, yes. Yeah, you sacrifice your benefits. So to give you the figures on it, because I get the enhanced rate of mobility only, I don't get the daily amount. My PIP was about £270 a month. And to get my Kia Picanto, I had to sacrifice £200 of that.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was because I couldn't afford the deposit. Now, you can bring that cost down by putting deposit in, but, but the most they will ever take off you in a month is your PIP amount.
Yeah.
So if you're getting 270 PIP, if you can afford 10 grand deposit for a nice Audi, then you can have a nice Audi for £200 a month as long as you've paid that big deposit up front. I hope that clears up a little bit. That's why I think we're aiming at the wrong target. Motability is not the problem here, PIP is.
This is, you from your vantage point, Alan, can see clearly how this system, obviously it's there to help people like yourself, but you can clearly see where it wobbles and creaks to the point that I don't know how we salvage it without hiking people's taxes.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of people who are abusing the system in the sense that they're lying about their condition. I think the tests are telling them they have the condition.
Yeah.
They don't
It's
actually.
a very good point. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
Listen, Alan, I wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you very much for being honest and sharing that story with us as well. That's Alan in the world to kick us off with. Cliff in Berkshire. I honestly believe the government wishes to destroy our nation financially so that we have to go to the IMF for a bailout. The conditions for such a bailout will be to rejoin the EU and adopt the euro currency. Oh, Cliff, don't do that to me, mate. I was just a sunny day out there. I was happy till I read that. But you do think in that way. I'm with Cliff. I'm Team Cliff on this. It forces you into that kind of cul-de-sac of thinking. More from you on the way. 0344 499 1000. Right now, let's get the latest news headlines at 2 o'clock on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
we return to the home, literally the home of common sense. You won't hear common sense like this anywhere else, kids. I mean, some places will give it a go. They'll pretend it's all about common sense, but underneath it all, I know, it's the same old flannel. This is where you get the real deal, pure pedigree, 100% unadulterated sense on a daily and a weekly basis, 24/7. What have we got this afternoon? We are naturally delving into that sickness benefit story. It's out of control under Labour. They were meant to say, oh, we're going to solve all of this, aren't we? Because the Tories messed it up. No, you ain't solving it, of course, because they've got welfare chaos. We understand that sickness benefits are set to outstrip minimum wage by 2026, costing 100 million quid by 2030. We've got 941 million pounds. These figures, which are monthly payouts to foreign nationals in terms of benefits, and Tory leader Kemi Badenoch vowing urgent reforms to block non-citizens and save the system from collapse. She said, we've become a welfare system with an economy attached to it, and she's not wrong. Also this afternoon, Emmanuel Macron's state visit exposes France's failure to stop Channel migrant crossings, despite us giving them the thick end of 800 million quid. Talks with Starmer on a week one in, one out migrant deal faced a bit of a backlash, with critics demanding tougher deportation policies to tackle smuggling gangs and the growing crisis. As we speak, Mr Macron is locked in a vault with Starmer in Downing Street. They will appear in broad daylight, somewhere around about 3:30, we think. We'll bring it to you live, or some of it, before you start dying of boredom. We'll bring you the salient details for sure right here on Talk. And resident doctors' 5-day strike risks 200,000 appointments, and Labour's NHS plan as public support fades and critics urge talks over pay demand. People will die as a result of doctors going on strike who already have a good pay rise, and their pay will naturally rise anyway. They've got good jobs, they come from good stock, good families. Come on. Really, guys? Get back to whip out your stethoscope, put your placard down, and get back behind the table. Details on that as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. This one from Stuart, who says, I think I read Stuart's out. Thank you, Stuart. This one comes in from Dean in Oxford. We have the oldest parliamentary house on earth. The house that every civilised country on earth models their own political genre. The house of democracy and free speech. The house that people vote people in to represent voices of those people. What do we get? Baying hyenas that want freedom of speech shut down and a howling out-of-control mob. No wonder our country is in a mess when they see those that are voted to represent us, the people, behave in this manner. What Farage had to put up with yesterday at PMQs was utterly disgusting, and the so-called speaker sat back and allowed this to happen before the eyes of the country. It's sickening, and Hoyle needs to be hauled before the Parliamentary Committee to be asked, why has he lost control of the people that we elected? I'm sick and tired of this. And a Prime Minister that, yet again, doesn't answer one single question. Honestly, what's the point? Brilliant point, Dean. And the salient part of what you said there is, of course, the person being booed, and it would apply to others who often get a booing or a baying, whatever you want to call it. I mean, these are people's representatives, OK? So other MPs should have a respect on that very notion alone. They don't have to agree with the person or even like the person. That's how a democracy works. OK, do you just stop people from talking? The only thing I would add, and we touched on this yesterday, is that every time that happens to Nigel Farage, his popularity goes up because it rather proves his point. Look, this lot don't want to listen. They don't want to hear me, and this has been the problem with our democracy. These people are tone deaf to common sense. So it does curiously sort of play well for Farage, but it's a horrendous scene when that happens. Dean, thank you. Let's get a word on the big political stories of the day. Harry Phibbs is back with us, journalist and local government editor at Conservative Home. Harry, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us as ever. Let's start with the sickness benefit story then. I mean, we can look at the specifics of this detail that's been thrown up. that suggests that £2,500 more will be earned if you are on sickness benefit than in a minimum wage job. But I think just the overarching story of the ineptitude of the last financial statement, where everything had to be rowed back on, so there was no welfare, literally no welfare reform, still have a big black hole there. The spiralling cost, 1 million more people in 5 years on some kind of health-related benefit. How long can the UK welfare system last, Harry?
Well, I think that's becoming a genuine question rather than just a sort of topic of conversation.
Yeah.
We are going to go broke, and I suppose the question is whether we actually deal with taking some tough decisions now about reforming the system, or whether we end up like Greece or Argentina or somewhere where you go to the bank and you can't get the money out. So I think with the sickness benefit, the problem is that if you pay people a lot more money for sickness benefit than being unemployed and able-bodied, then that gives them an incentive to apply. I mean, it's a huge incentive, a lot of extra money, and also, of course, it means that then if they get that extra money, then they're better off on benefits than they are working. Sure. And so I think we need to start by thinking, look, why should people, even if it's genuine that they've got some sickness or disability, they don't need necessarily more groceries or more money for housing or more money for heating or other utilities. Why should they automatically be getting all this extra money than regular unemployed people? So those are sort of some of the tough decisions that need to be thought about. And even if we weren't going bust, is it necessarily a benefit for people to be completely stuck on benefits if they've got, for example, maybe quite genuine mental illness, genuine depression? It's better to do everything possible to get people working than have them written off on benefits. So we need to start taking some tough decisions now, or we'll end up being forced to take some crisis decisions once the checks are bouncing.
Well, indeed, and one can only see it going in that direction, because the issue around this, even had Rachel Reeves's reforms gone ahead, we would still be in this same position. All it was going to do was slow the rate of growth. So it was never going to solve the problem.
That's right, and and it's a shame, because Ian Duncan-Smith, when he was Work and Welfare Secretary, he had managed to get through some good reforms to simplify the system and to provide incentives for people to work. And then we had the pandemic, and then everything was left aside. And I mean, Fraser Nelson's done some good research on this, sure, whereby the checks just aren't in place. That people get, instead of having to go for an interview, they do it on the phone, and the incentives are to just get the thing approved. And if it's all just approved very quickly, then there's no rigor in the system. Sure. So there's a lot of abuse in that respect. But even when it's genuine claims, that people are getting put on benefits and they're stuck on benefits, and they're not given the incentive to go. And it's a natural condition for people. It's a healthy condition for people to be going out to work. And a lot of the people who would like to be able to go out to work find themselves trapped in a system whereby that would just cost them too much money. They've got responsibilities to their families often, and they just think, look, I'd like to go out to work, but we've got this mad, perverse system where people who go out and earn money are penalised, and there needs to be drastic, radical change to it.
Drastic indeed, but and the word drastic can't be overstated. I mean, it has to be seismic. And my fear, though, on all of this, Harry, is that the answer will be, well, yeah, it's going to be a big old tax rise for those right at the top. Well, in fact, not even those right at the top. The 45% rate becomes 50%.
Yes, well, I think that's what the government will do, and then we're increasingly at the stage whereby that becomes counterproductive. We're at the sure, what this chap with the napkin. Do you remember Arthur Laffer, who said, which is obviously common sense, that if you keep putting up the tax beyond a certain point, then you end up with lower revenue, because people don't have the incentive to work. Some people would go abroad. People would look to their accountant to find them some complicated dodge that it becomes counterproductive to put up tax beyond a certain point, and I think we're probably pretty much there. So, but I think you're right that with the government we've got and the Labour backbenchers and their mentality, we'll probably go even further down that route. We'll find, in a year's time, oh look, that didn't work, and we'll be an even worse mess in terms of our public finances.
Spot on. Let's move to this story. Jake Berry. So Jake Berry, friend of this show, sometimes on the team sheet here at Talk, has found himself defecting. I say found himself. He chose, of course. Former chairman of the Conservative Party, lost his seat at the last election, but now has defected to Reform. He says the party is the last chance to pull Britain back from decline. I like Jake a lot. I think, fair to say, I don't think he's a household name right across the land, Harry, but it's certainly significant nonetheless when a former Conservative Party chairman legs it to the other side.
Yes, there's always a difficulty for Reform UKs, and they've got this balance of thinking that they want to have people with some experience on their team, but on the other hand, they don't want to be tainted by the old guard, and so they've obviously decided that it's worth having him on board. I thought his article in The Sun was very good in terms of his messages about how the Conservatives had lost their way in terms of we want free enterprise, a low tax economy, we want to be tough on crime, we want to have secure borders, and all these Conservative themes that traditionally Conservative voters would have supported, feeling that the Conservative government, with obviously including him, had failed to deliver on. I mean, he's a friend of yours and a friend of the show. I'm actually a little bit cynical in that some of his statements in the past, he voted Remain in the EU referendum, he was a supporter of net zero. Some of his stuff on the Northern Research Group seemed to be saying the way to level up was subsidies and state intervention rather than the free enterprise approach. So I'm a little bit iffy about him. I'm a bit more of a fan in a way of the other Conservative cabinet minister who defected, David Jones, who has made very clear that he's not doing it as a career thing. He's not trying to get back into Parliament, and he's obviously made a decision that as a free market Conservative, as a Brexiteer, he thinks the Conservative Party is no longer the way to achieve that, and that Reform UK is a better prospect. Indeed.
And this story, Lord Hermer. He is, of course, the Attorney General, the main man, and it's a curious story. He's given himself a veto over government policy. He's introduced a snitch clause requiring government lawyers to report ministers defying legal advice to the Attorney General. That happens to be him at the moment. His updated guidance prioritises compliance with international law, treating treaties like the Chagos deal as equal to national law. Should we be worried on this one?
I think we should be worried. I think it's a symptom of a wider malaise, really, with how the law's going. We want law to be clear. We want law to be certain. What we don't want is lawyers to be able to just make it up as they go along and say, oh, well, it's a living instrument. And we get all this with human rights laws and the European Convention on Human Rights and all these other things where people don't actually know what the law is, and there's no certainty involved, and the lawyers love it because we end up with a sort of dictatorship whereby you can elect a government and then the lawyers say, oh yes, but we decided that under human rights law that takes precedent and we can decide this and that and the other. And so it's a power grab, isn't it, that he's now saying that he can choose what he decides the law is with no great basis of clarity. And I think I think it's very bad, but it's a broader thing than just Lord Hermer being a villain. We need to go back to a clear, basic legal system where we know what the law is and it's decided by Parliament, and it's based on what we decide in elections and who we send there, and then they pass the law like the good old days.
Indeed. Well, you'd think so, wouldn't you? It's not too much to ask. Harry, thank you very much indeed for that. Harry Phibbs, journalist, local government editor of Conservative Home. Thank you to him. A couple of comments in from you. One here, no name given. Living in modern-day Britain is joyless, boring and humourless. Can't have banter with your mates, can't flirt with the opposite sex, can't afford, and that's where it ends. So I don't know, afford what? A night out, a holiday? I guess so. One here from Jean in Lancashire. I was really interested to read this. Jean says, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia in my 20s. I was a single parent with 2 young children to care for. My mum moved in with me to help out, and together we raised the kids. I find that heartbreaking. Is it not heartbreaking in a bad way? Uplifting. That was such a nice family decision to make. We'll do it between us, we'll get it done, we'll make it happen. Anyway, that's not Jean's point. Jean's point is this. Despite her own mental health challenges, she says, my son now lives in Dubai. He's a project director in the events industry. My daughter is a single parent living in Saudi. Wow. And she is a business manager and assistant to the CEO in the media sector. It's just not true that if a parent has a mental illness, that their kids will have a difficult life. Neither of them have ever claimed anything from the state. It's lovely to hear that, Jean. I hope they get back from time to time as well to say hello to their old mum. I say old mum, I don't know, you might be 40. But Jean, thank you for that. Paul Barnes says, I'm almost 68, just recently retired 2 years overdue, retired 3 weeks, struggled to afford to retire, but taken the leap now. I got disabled injuries from both the army and the police, classed as disabled for life, but can't claim a single penny. I can't even get a blue badge. What's the bets this government takes benefits away from the entitled Indigenous disabled citizens long before they take it away, or stop the illegal immigrants from getting benefits? Another nail in the coffin for the United Kingdom and its Indigenous people, says Paul, military veteran, former police service in Cornwall, a person who's paid all his dues, not just financially, but also in terms of the kind of work you did, Paul. Thank you, mate, for that. That stinks, doesn't it? I keep going. Maybe you've banged your head against a brick wall too often. I don't know. My thoughts would be keep going and break the wall down and get what you're entitled to. And as you rightly say, you look across and go, hang on a second, how did you get this when you're a foreign national, a fairly decent person, I'm sure, but how are you entitled? I'm entitled to nothing, you're entitled to that? That's mad. 0344 499 1000.
Well, I found the whole spectacle, frankly, obscene. I'm actually less exercised by the cost of the banquet than the fact that we wheeled out our finest royals and traditions to welcome this guy who has done nothing other than stitch us up for a period of many years. We have stuffed Macron's mouth with gold, and in return, he has basically made fools of us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's go to the phones. Ben is in Essex. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good, Ian. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thanks. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, just this is what you're saying about the mental health and all the benefits and stuff. And it's a very difficult thing, I believe, mental health. And I believe all of us go through a period where we're feeling a bit depressed or something's happened in our life. And I think it's a tough one for doctors, you know, to diagnose that to somebody. It's not like you go in and you've got something wrong with you that's obvious. Mental health is, I think it's a tough one. But I honestly believe that if we've got a better economy, a thriving economy, you know, people are working.
Is it? I mean, people. We've got loads of jobs out there, right? But they're not all the jobs that pay loads of money. I mean, if you took a shift in a restaurant or something, yeah, it'd be a job. But you probably wouldn't be able to afford to go on holiday and pay your rent.
I get that, yeah, and I think the government's got a bit to blame for this. I think if you was to lower taxes and incentivise business, have a more capitalist economy, I honestly believe there'd be more money. People would need to work on benefits. You know, I mean, say what you want about capitalism. The best economies, the best countries thriving in capitalism because people are making money. There's more supply and demand, and people are happier. I remember Trump turned around once and said, "You want to stop being depressed? Work your butt off."
Yep.
And I believe that when we're working, we've got a sense of purpose. People are earning. People have got less incentive to want to go on benefits, and people are happier. You know, when you've got someone that's got purpose,
But that's you're right. I mean, you know, they do this happiness scale, don't they? That's released. I think it's every year. You know, how happy are we as a people? The first time I saw it, I thought it was a joke, but actually, I thought, no, there's a real good reason for that because it does have a knock-on effect to all sorts of things, from crime and mental health, blah blah blah. And I wonder if it is that. Is it just that sense of hopelessness? Is that what we're dealing with here?
I think so. Yes, I think that when you've got a lack of purpose in life, that's where it starts. I think. Yeah. I mean, I think mental health, I believe, is there's several pillars, isn't there? It's your work, your career, your finances, your relationships. You know, your home life, where you live, and also your health. It's everything. As well. And I think if one of those starts, it drops. It tends to domino, doesn't it? I think. If you're working, you're earning, you've got a sense of purpose in life, you're generally going to be happier.
Yes, and I think that is exactly it. Ben, thank you very much indeed. I'll move on to get more comment on. This came from somebody calling themselves Mark Jones. Looks like an account they probably set up just in order to send one message, knowing that it might get read out. And the reason I'm going to read this out is because it does reflect a view. And most of you who are with us on a daily basis here will understand, and your head will hit the desk. Ian Collins moaning about the disabled on benefits again. How dare they claim benefits for being disabled? Ian, give it a rest. You're promoting bigotry and bullying. Except it's the very opposite to that. We're talking about people who aren't disabled on benefit, not people who are disabled. Hence the reason why I said probably about 8 times in 1 hour that none of this is about people who are disabled, people who need the money. Most of us, and I'll say it again, most of us are more than happy. In fact, I would pay more to people who have a disability who are struggling and not even getting the state help they need. So I think that helps. I think Mark, his name's not Mark, I think he knows that, but for some reason decided to send it to us anyway. But my purpose of reading it is because, believe me, there are some people. I heard a guy on a phone in recently who was like very clearly a bit of a socialist, and the presenter said, "So what about your circumstances?" And this guy went, "Oh, well, I'm one of the most hated groups of people in the country." And I thought, hello, was he, you know? And he went, "I'm disabled and unemployed." And everyone in the studio went, "So what do you mean one of the most hated? Who hates disabled people? Is there such a thing? Is that actually a thing? Does that position exist as a human being? I hate disabled people." I don't know anybody that thinks that. For some reason, this guy thought it. He thought that he was one of the most maligned. And no, I don't recognise this. Who is attacking disabled people? I don't mean literally. Lydia is in Medway. Lydia, how you doing?
Hi, Ian. Yeah, just a bit nervous because it's my first time.
Listen, you're in Medway. You know, it's God's own country, right?
Yeah.
What have you got for us?
I don't know whether people with mental health they make it easy for, but a friend of mine, he works in a very highly stressful job, and he suffers from PTSD.
Okay.
And also depersonalisation disorder.
What is that? Depersonalisation disorder?
Yeah, well, it was only found out about 10, 15 years ago. It's really rare, so a lot of people don't. But basically, everything around you's not. It's like you're watching everything around you through a screen, so everything doesn't feel real, and you still also lack emotion, as in feelings.
Yeah.
And obviously, that has a big effect on his mental health. But he still goes out and works.
Still does it?
Yep. Even though he has his bad days, he will still go out and work.
And in what sounds like a pretty good job, right?
Yeah, he works in a pretty good job, but it's a very highly stressful mental job.
Yeah, yeah.
So it requires a lot of skill and a lot of concentration.
Yeah.
But I sometimes don't know whether I'm making it easy for people with mental health.
Do you? I mean, those who've got a mental health problem have as much a problem as those who have a physical health problem, right?
Yeah, in some cases, yeah.
But of course, there are other people that probably have some anxiety, which is nothing like what your mate has. He's clearly got something much more severe.
Yeah, we tried to commit suicide before he was diagnosed because no one knew what was wrong with him.
That's terribly sad.
So, but yeah, it affects him every day. He'll always live with that.
Yep.
Dissociation disorder. That's never going to go away.
That's an extraordinary.
It still goes out and works, basically.
I'm glad to hear it. It can happen, and I think in a lot of cases, people do. Thank you, Lydia, for that. Just some further detail on depersonalisation. Derealisation order. Derealisation order. It's a dissociative order where individuals experience a persistent or recurring feeling of detachment from their own mental process, body or surroundings. So you're kind of like in a sort of 3D thing, and you're part of the D, but not all of it. I can see that, and I can see how that would monkey around with your brain after a while if you had that as on an ongoing basis. Thank you to Lydia. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Is that where we're at? We come back to a point that I've made so many times on this programme, and it came up with our previous caller, just about how happy the UK isn't. Now, our first guest, who came from a more socialist perspective, in fact, Antoine, does make a point that I'd actually already made this point now. I hadn't seen your text at the time. Can you shut this socialist mug down by telling him the suicide rate of Scandinavia? The fool lives in a fabricated lies alone and has a children's understanding of the world, bored listening to these idiotic scripted lines by sixth form common room level thinking. In defence of our previous guest, Antoine, that's his political position. He thinks very hard about it, he researches it, and he believes that, you know, life could function differently. And it's great. We live in a democracy. I don't want to personalise it and attack him for that. I do think he's wrong. I agree with Antoine on that point. I think the idea that you could just conjure up a solution to all of these issues If everybody had a chance, if everybody had more money, if everybody had... Well, it's like if you solved every problem, we wouldn't have anything wrong. We no mental health crisis, no physical health crisis, there'd be no crime, everyone would have a job, nice holiday, nice... You could keep doing that. I don't know how you achieve that. At some point you have to say, look, you know, on this merry-go-round of life, there'll be some people who are doing just fine all of the time. There'll be some people doing really fine all of the time. Most people will be doing kind of all right most of the time. There'll be some people who are doing not so good a lot of the time. You keep doing that. They won't all be the same people at the same time. Life changes. You do have to make your own efforts. I don't think in this country, if you just suddenly lobbed a load more cash into somebody's pocket, you'd suddenly find everyone became really happy all of a sudden because they could maybe have a weekend away in Hastings. 0344 499 1000. We're also going to talk junior doctors in a second as well. That incredible pay offer or pay request they are asking for. It's not going to turn into an offer, I can tell you that much. Details coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk. 0344 499 1000. What have we got? Loads happening, lots coming your way in a few moments' time. And of course, the resident doctors' strike is penciled into the diary for the end of the month. Could see over 200,000 hospital appointments being cancelled as the BMA demands a 29% pay rise for its medics. Let's have a listen to Wes Streeting speaking on this very issue earlier today.
These strikes are unnecessary, given this government's willingness and eagerness to work together to improve resident doctors' working conditions. And following a 28.9% pay rise, thanks to the actions of this government, the BMA's threatened industrial action is entirely unreasonable. I am asking them again today to pause, call off the strikes, and instead work with the government to rebuild their members' working conditions and rebuild our NHS.
Wes Streeting addressing Parliament earlier today. Let's get a word on this with Alice Denby, opinion and features editor at City AM. Alice, good afternoon to you. It's funny, isn't it? Can you imagine working in the job we work in journalism and asking for a 29% pay rise? Imagine how that would go down in the old meeting.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it calls into question this whole concept of pay restoration. I mean, you and I could ask for pay restoration for 2008 before social media, when we could sell a lot more newspapers. I don't agree that there's any kind of entitlement in the public sector to a certain level of pay. And even if you accept that argument, their own numbers don't add up. So their 29% figure, they've based it on RPI inflation rather than CPI, which is the measure that the Treasury would normally use. If you look at CPI, okay, since 2008, their pay has gone down by apparently about 4.7%. But if you benchmark it to 2015, their pay has actually gone up by 7.9%. So West Streeting is absolutely right that these demands are completely unreasonable. And what they're doing here, let's be honest, is holding patients to ransom. We've still got 7.4 million people on the waiting list. We're going to have maybe 200,000 appointments cancelled due to this strike action. That is going to be people having later cancer diagnoses, people missing their diagnosis completely, and people like my mum, who's living in agony at the moment, waiting for a hip replacement, waiting even longer. I think it's completely unconscionable. I think it's completely unreasonable and unaffordable, as West Streeting says, and I think it's immoral, and I'm not surprised that only 20% of the public support these strikes.
Yeah, and what I find irksome, if that's the right phrase, is that I actually think the BMA know it's unreasonable, and they clearly know that this is, and because they had such a pay rise before, relatively recently, it kind of compounds our suspicions around this. One would assume they've started at 29%. They'd like to think they might settle for 10%, which would be twice what they've been offered, as I understand it. That's usually how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, West Streeting is saying all the right things now, but the fact is that he submitted, he just gave them a huge pay rise. He let them change their name from junior doctors to resident doctors so they could sound a bit more American, like they think they're all George Clooney. And frankly, the BMA now sense weakness.
Yeah.
We know that this is an extremely aggressive union that's basically had infiltration by far left people. The deputy chair of the BMA, Emma Ronswick, calls herself an unashamed socialist. And I think they see that if they can stand firm on this, they can, cut a path to many other trade unions to get much bigger pay rises from the government when we know this is completely unaffordable.
Yeah, I mean, Bob Crow didn't even go in this kind of department when he was negotiating. Some of those old lefty duffers back in the day, the Scargills and whoever of this world, would be blushing at this kind of thing. 29%. We never asked for that for the miners.
Absolutely shameless. And as I say, nobody in the private sector thinks that they can get a 30% pay rise. Everybody in the private sector understands that pay rises are based on performance, for one thing, and resources in the company. And this country just simply does not have the resources to pay these doctors. And frankly, does their performance merit it? Look at the waiting list. Have you had an experience with the NHS recently? Can you get a doctor's appointment?
Yep.
How long have you waited in A&E? The NHS isn't getting any better. Productivity in the public sector is far lower than it is in the private sector. So I think we need to have a completely different conversation about this. In the BMA living in fantasy land.
100%. Alice, great to have you on with us. Thank you for your time. Alice Denby is opinion and features editor at City AM. It is fairy tale stuff. It is ridiculous. People will die. It's irresponsibility. It's a kind of Marxist, ferocious, unpleasant, deeply, deeply unpleasant. If you get to that sort of level of left-wing thinking, which is why it's always been not just kind of annoying, that underplays it, but almost criminal, the way that those on the left, and I only mention this because Alice there did reference one of the BMA officials who describes themselves as an unashamed socialist. It's like, I bet you're a posh girl. Unashamed socialist, parents are going to leave you about £1 trillion worth of home, and you're doing all right. But people dine out on that. But that's the problem. They believe that just by calling themselves this, they are a better person than you are. They're a nicer kind of person. And when it comes to this, then it's fine. If people die, and people will die if you cancel that amount of hospital appointments, then the knock-on effect and the domino effect of that is so massive. Just scans and appointments and things that get put over to weeks ahead, 2 weeks ahead, 3 weeks ahead. People will die, and it will die because of the doctors. And those socialists will go, battles are fought in this way. People have always died when going into political battle of whatever kind. Get in the bin, you half-wits. This is just deeply unpleasant. If you work in that world, I know I'm going to stereotype a bit. If you're and by the way, junior doctors, resident doctors, one of the reasons they wanted to change the name, not unreasonably, we always had that idea. It was always a terrible name, junior doctors. People who've been doctors for 10 years still called junior doctors. Resident doctors. So we're not all newbies, but most come from good stock, all right? The average doctor comes from a good, nice, fairly cosy, comfortable, middle-class family. So that's the starting point. Yes, their wage, to kick off with, is not up there with what you might imagine. Wow, you're doing that for a living and then you 14 quid an hour, whatever it is. Well, it's better than most, but it doesn't stay that way for very long. And it accelerates rather quickly. And once you're in that job over sort of 5, 6, 7 years, you'll find yourself in the over £100,000, £200,000 kind of jobs. If you specialise and move forward and keep qualifying into other clinical areas, then it will increase again. And then on top of that, you have a pension that is incredibly generous and you have a job for life. We all understand the brilliance of good clinicians and we thank them and doff our caps on a daily basis, particularly when they help us or our own family. But you have to also have a reality check. This is not a profession that is starving. Do not shed tears for resident doctors. They are having you over, they are conning you, they are trying to pretend that they're skint and starving. They are not. They're doing just fine, all right? They just want more money. Your money, by the way. And yeah, pay them well. And as they shift through their career, their money will increase disproportionately to anything most people could ever imagine, again, along with their pension and their job security, and of course the work, their dalliances in the private sector as well. Do not cry or shed tears for resident doctors. They don't deserve it. Grace is down in London on a issue connected to this, of course, the doctors' strike. Grace, good afternoon to you.
Hi. I was interested that you used the word, was it starving a moment ago? And isn't it funny how in recent years there's been more from Corbyn and Corbynites about the need to give more money to junior doctors than there has been about the fact there are starving people in our world. I always thought that people on the left, and I would normally consider myself on the left, but I'm blooming confused these days, should be concerned about the people who are the very most disadvantaged. And instead they're calling for more money for people who, in the courses of their careers, will earn multiple times what other people earn.
Sure.
And it's really frustrating. I'm thinking, there are children in our world who can't even access their basic vaccines. There are people who don't have the healthcare that we do, as much as the NHS is struggling. Some people don't have healthcare at all, and yet apparently the people we need to be worried about are people who are going to earn far more than most people will do. And I'm very bothered by the way that when one discusses this issue, it's always about doctors are they're so important and they're so clever, and I'm thinking that they're looking down on other workers, and other workers are really vital as well. Doctors can do what they do because scientists for centuries have developed medical science. They can do what they do because teachers taught them in school. They can do what they do because people work on the roads to make it possible for them to get to hospitals. Lots of people in society are really vital, and there's this kind of snariness, like, we are more important, therefore we should get more money. It's not let's have fewer hours because we're so stressed. I understand that they could be blooming stressed and they work very hard, but that's not what they're talking about. They just want more cash.
Correct. Well, that's the problem. There really is. I mean, what Wes Streeting said, look, I can talk to you about conditions if that's the issue. Most doctors, as you say, no doctor, literally none, Grace, is starving in this country. Some people are starving. It's not doctors.
I mean, I grew up with this idea that what one should aim towards, and I really failed at it, but I feel like what I should aim towards is to try to be selfless. And I came in time to believe in Jesus, who showed us the ultimate selflessness. And for a while, our country had that idea that selflessness was the thing that you should aim at. But I feel like for people of my generation and younger, they are being told, no, you should aim to get more for yourself. And that really worries me, because I think, where is our society going if everyone just wants to get more and more for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. People want, a fair fair day's pay for a fair innings in terms of the work. But I get that, we all understand that, but I don't think doctors are entitled to that criteria in their own circumstances. Grace, thank you very much indeed. We'll talk to Jill shortly also on doctors' strikes. This one from Deb, who says junior doctors are coming back again for a second go after that unprecedented 22% they got last year from a weak government who they genuinely believe will cave in again. I genuinely believe will cave in again. This is what we get and always will get with a Labour government. These doctors, simply greed shows they are nothing. They care nothing about their patients or the NHS. They know the money is not there, and somewhere along the line the private sector will have to pay the bill. And interestingly, Deb, I mean, what you've highlighted there, I know it's the obvious, but it's worth saying again. This strike was announced after Rachel Reeves, had to row back on, they were trying to modify the welfare bill because it was too expensive. And then they had to, because all the sort of screaming lefty meerkats on the back benches went, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, do not ever tinker with this in any shape or form, no matter how reasonable or understandable or even fair it might be. Fairness works in many, many ways and affects many, many people when it comes to welfare, etc. So against that, so they sat and watched that unravel in Parliament, where the government going, we're literally broke, we've got no money, we thought we were going to save some money on the increase in welfare. Well, it turns out we've got absolutely sod all in the pot, and now we've got to go back to the drawing board because the left-wing massive on the back benches have crowed so loudly that the government have caved in. So we're now back to square one. We're more skint than we would have been. So even against that, the junior doctors are coming along and, right, what about you raise our money by a third? Really? A third? You serious? Did anybody ever ask for that in any negotiation anywhere? That's what they've done, so they know it. This is socialism in action. Remember, the BMA, one of the most radical groups of people as far as I can see. These were the people, by the way, that were opposed. Listen to this. They were opposed to the NHS beginning back in the 40s. They didn't want it to happen. Take away money from our doctors if you start socialising it. So they play that game all the time. Bunch of weirdos. 0344 499 1000. We have the voice of doom coming. The voice of doom didn't happen yesterday because the power cut happened. Took us off air for over an hour. Everything was scuppered yesterday. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen since I've done this job, which is like forever. 0344 499 1000.
I do think those of us who care passionately and deeply about this country, we've got one last big job in us, one last duty, and that's to get behind reform and try and improve Britain.
And you can feel the change, and you can feel, I mean, every day we talk to people, as you know, on this show, who call in with their stories and their experiences, and a lot of people now use the word, it's unfair to me. They say it's fairness that they're bothered about, because under Labour, you know, I don't think anybody quite can believe how bad they are. I mean, we all thought they'd have policies that we might not agree with, but the incompetence, the sheer incompetence of what's happening.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's the voice of... I'm told it's day 17. I might have to go to a sort of trade union negotiation table on this, because I'm sure it's like day 15. And Dave, who's our other technical operator, I think he's adding days onto it. Because I'm sure yesterday was day 16 and we didn't do it yesterday. And then I wasn't here Monday either. So, I don't know. I don't mind. Anyway, it's a lot of... It's nearly 3 weeks. Let's look at it that way. Or just over 2 weeks. It's the mystery voice with a political edge to it. The question, one question, who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
We know we are looking for a former Conservative Cabinet Minister, now no longer with us. So it's therefore not Michael Howard, David Cameron, Boris Johnson. These are some of the big guesses. It's clearly not Boris Johnson, but it's strange. Have another listen.
I can't guarantee that.
It's just not... It's... But when you hear that voice, you go, yeah, it does sound like a Tory minister. Which one does it sound like? And you probably go, well, all of them. It's a little bit of that. Can we hear it again?
I can't guarantee that.
Yeah, it could be any one of those old duffers, couldn't it? But it's of the past, all right? So I don't mean like the 60s or something. Who is it? There's the question. 87222. If you think you know, don't phone, just message 87222. Hopefully we'll get a right answer and then we can tell you after the news at 3. One more listen.
I can't guarantee that.
And we can't guarantee there will be a winner. We'll find out after there's no prize, by the way, but do give it a go if you think you know. 87222 is the number. Back on your calls. Jill is in Cornwall on doctor's strikes. What have you got for us, Jill? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you too. Well, I used to work in a hospital in North Devon a few years back now. And to be perfectly honest, this doctor's strike thing is becoming a joke, if you ask me. They get a rise, give it 12 months, and then they want another rise, and so it goes on. To be perfectly honest, I would put more money into recruiting more staff, the staff that do the work, the physical work within the hospital. Because if we have more of them, then, well... The doctors won't need to feel so important. I mean, I know that they diagnose, I know that they do a job and what have you, but they get more money now than some people get who've been working for a lot longer.
Yep.
Their jobs are just as important, may not be just as life-saving as doctors, but are just as important. And yet they just continue to do their job and get the odd rise here and there, but I'm sick to the back teeth of the doctors every so many months coming out and asking and demanding more.
What is your take on this idea, Jill, that it's a restorative pay rise? So it's just going back to what they would have got had they been given a pay rise every year, blah, blah, blah. Am I alone in not quite understanding the maths on that, or even the entitlement to it? That if inflation goes up, you should get a pay rise that's connected to that. Now, yes, ideally that would be good, and most companies, I think, tend to do that for staff, but it's not surely obligatory there's going to be times when it can't happen.
Well, doctors are behaving in a way that is most unlike doctors and nursing staff. You know, when I was working in hospitals, nursing staff did the job because, well, it was something within them to sort of help and look after and all the rest of it. Something you can't put a word to, but it's just there.
Yeah.
But doctors are becoming so money orientated. I'm only going to do this job if you give me X amount of, you know, and I'm sorry, but there are staff within the NHS that deal with the paperwork side and the phone call side and everything else other than the stethoscope side, and they're on huge sums of money. And if doctors get their way, every time they threaten us with strike or, then we are going to end up in a situation where we can't afford one doctor, let alone the amount of money that this lot wants.
100%. And that's where we're at, Jill. Thank you very much indeed. I can only see this ending in absolute abject misery, frankly. No way around it. Let's go to Mike in Warwickshire. What are your points, Mike? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You were talking earlier about mental health issues.
Yeah.
And they do exist, and that is a truth, and I have no problem. We should support those people. However, before COVID, we didn't have anything like the number of mental health issues that we've now got.
Yeah.
Now, once COVID hit, the unions, who are at the roots of a lot of this stuff, as far as I'm concerned, the unions, etc., they turned around and said that people working from home will create a whole load of people with mental health issues. That being the case, maybe the unions should be turning around and saying to the workers, get back to the office, it's good for your mental health.
Yeah.
And then we could reduce the problem.
Well, there's a lot of mangled logic going out there, right?
Yeah.
Trying to square the circle. Where do you think this is going, Mike? Well, what's the direction of travel of this weird era we seem to be going through?
Well, it's very simple, and I understand why people wouldn't want to, right? So why would you want to go home? Why would you want to go to work when you can stay at home and put your washing out and you have your weekends even more free and get paid the same money, but you're not paying to go to work, you're not paying petrol or whatever, even though you took the job there, right? So people go, well, I'm better off, and all the other bits. So why would I want to go back to the office?
Yeah.
And then people turn around and say, well, like you said earlier on, you fill this form out online, and then the next minute the government starts sending you a load of money. Well, you need to have proper checks for these things. And like everything, we haven't. And when it comes down to people who have come here from abroad illegally, who are now getting this money as well, you've got to ask yourself, are we really that stupid?
Well, maybe we are. 941 million monthly payouts to foreign nationals. Mike, thank you very much indeed for that. Lots still to come, more comment. And the voice of doom, who is this?
I can't guarantee that.
87222 if you think you know. Right now, let's get the latest news headlines right here on Talk at 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is indeed the voice of doom. 034. Well, no, it's not indeed. The voice of doom is on its way in a second. It is indeed the home of common sense, which is also the home of the voice of doom. All right. We'll come to that in just a second. In the meantime, what have we got here this afternoon? Sickness benefits spiralling out of control. It has gone through the roof. It is catastrophic. No one knows how it can continue to be paid for, and we're in a position where we are set to outstrip the minimum wage by 2026 when it comes to those on certain sickness benefits. You could be earning more on the sickness benefit than you would be if you were earning the minimum wage. It's crazy. We've got 941 million monthly payouts to foreign nationals. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch is saying, frankly, what we have here is a welfare system with an economy attached to it. Also this afternoon, Emmanuel Macron's state visit exposes France's failure to stop channel crossings, despite the fact we've given them the thick end of 800 million quid from the UK taxpayer. There are talks ongoing. They're in Downing Street as we speak. Starmer and Macron are there. They are due to make an announcement around about 3:30 this afternoon with the further details about smuggling gangs and one in, one out, the most nonsense, ludicrous load of old jip you ever heard in your life. We'll give you the full details and we'll bring you that live. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Let's do the voice of doom. So, this is the mystery voice with a political angle. Have we got a winner? Let's have a listen to the voice again.
I can't guarantee that.
I can't guarantee that. Who is that? These are some. Remember, you are looking for a no longer alive former Conservative Secretary of State. These are some of the guesses. Zach Goldsmith. He's 50 years old, for God's sake, and still very much alive. John Gummer. He's an old duffer, but he's alive, 85. It's not him. Idi Amin. It's the right answer. Wouldn't that be funny? Norman Tebbit, sadly not, who left us just a couple of days ago. Francis Pimmett is not. Ken Clarke, again, alive at 85. Douglas Hurd, alive at 95. Kenneth Baker, alive at 90. Sort of works. But we've got a winner. We've actually got a winner. Andrew in Salisbury. I mean, did give a lot of clues, really. We'd exhausted it all. Not to in any way diminish Andrew's political brilliance and his radar for being on top of things. The answer is, and you're going to go, ooh, the answer is Paul Shannon. Paul Shannon was former Secretary of State, I think for business, as well as business and trade, as well. I think he was Transport Secretary as well. I've got a funny feeling, I might be wrong, but I think he was between the 24th of January 1986 and the 13th of June 1987. It's just a rough guess. I mean, if you were that good, believe me, you shouldn't be doing this. You should be, I don't know, lecturing somewhere. But yes, so he's minister and he served under John Major's time in office. Was it John Major or Margaret Thatcher? What did I say? 86? Oh, 86, 87, yeah. Well, it's Margaret Thatcher, of course. Paul Shannon was the answer. Fairly suave, kind of debonair, privately educated Etonian. Without even looking, I would guess he went to Oxford or Cambridge. Nothing wrong with that, James. I do understand that. However, he does tick a certain Tory box when it comes to his tenure in Westminster. And he died. When did he die? I'll give you a lot of information about this bloke, aren't I? He died in 2007. And I found he became an MP at 23. And do you know who he took over from? His dad. I mean, talk about an old boys network. He was succeeded by, sadly, David Amess, of course, who is no longer with us because of his tragic death as a constituent MP. That was Southend West, Member of Parliament for Southend West. I find these numbers breathtaking. Should we just do a whole show on Paul Shannon? from 1959 to 1997, how long's that in real years? 59 to 97. Paul Shannon was the MP for Southend West. That's 38 years. 38 years. Staggering. And David Amess, I mean, he did the job from 83 to 97. He was Basildon. It was back then, of course, his first constituency. And then went on to represent Southend West. We're just going to go through loads of MPs here. Throw me an MP, I'll give you some data right off the top of my head. Margaret Thatcher, no longer with us, all right? First female Prime Minister. Theresa May, second female Prime Minister. Liz Truss, third female Prime Minister. It shouldn't matter gender these days. But Labour have still not had a female leader, which is kind of interesting. Let's move to shall we move to another story? So well done, by the way, to Andrew in Salisbury. We had a little walk around some trivia there on politicians. Paul Shannon, I didn't know he did that long as an MP. You'd really know the rule book, wouldn't you, after 38 years? Let's move to this story. This, of course, ties into everything we've been talking about a lot, of course, over the last few weeks, culminating today when there'll be an announcement, we imagine, right in Downing Street, on the steps of Downing Street, in the garden. Where will it be? But this is the headline. Just 50 migrants a week are to be returned to France after Keir Starmer's much-touted deal with Macron. His state visit continues. Leaked plans reveal how many migrants will be returned to France under a new deal. 50. Let's get a word with former MEP Andrew England-Kerr who on how effective this deterrent is likely to be. Andrew, good afternoon to you. I don't know whether to laugh or cry, to be honest. I mean, it almost deserves, frankly, it deserves no analysis at all. This is clearly ridiculous and bonkers. Good afternoon.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Ian, and thank you very much for the invite. I mean, if you look at it, that means 2,600 will be returned annually. Well, we've had over 44,000 since Labour have come in, let alone the ones already here. It's totally and utterly ridiculous. Yeah. Personally, I would never have invited that person here who's made it no secret he wanted to harm Britain after the Brexit vote. But I think if you want a practical way forward, is really we are in a crisis without a shadow of doubt. You only have to look at even Northern Ireland. Is it now? Are we now at the stage, or are we going to shortly that we're going to have to declare a national crisis, which may well be the case soon?
It might be, yes. I mean, it's that severe, right?
It is, without a shadow of doubt. We just cannot. It's causing so much unrest, and so I think if it was me, I think I would do a multiple approach to try and get this. Number one, leave the European Convention of Human Rights, which has been badly abused and not fit for purpose now. It's only assisting criminals, not the honest and decent people, and defies common sense. I'd also stop any more legal aid being given to lawyers helping these illegal immigrants, because the vast majority of British citizens can't get legal aid. Yep. So why should we give it to illegal criminals and the fat lawyers? I'd stop them having any benefits. I'd also say, number one, also that no one would have their asylum application processed if they've entered the UK illegally and through a safe country. That would put the real thing. I'd also probably get the Navy to say to start turning around boats and stopping them coming into our waters. And that's a multiple approach, because we cannot continue to have this going. And I think Starmer, it's a minute but little step, and it is probably worse than doing nothing, because it will give the incentive that he doesn't have to do anything more for a while.
You do have to wonder, Andrew, though, don't you? And there's no big reveal in me saying this, because lots of us have thought of it for a long time. But there's no political will here, is that? That's the biggest problem. No. Certainly not. I don't think there's much with Rishi Sunak, to be honest, but there's certainly zero with Keir Starmer. It's not really in their DNA. It's not. They don't feel it. They don't get this one. It's not part of their political terrain.
Well, let's see what is going to be the consequence if it carries on. I should think, and I may well be wrong, and I'll hold up my hands if I do get it wrong, but this will be probably the biggest next election decision that people will make about the illegal immigrant if they haven't sorted it. And there is a big fear, I think, that if Labour go down really badly, as the polls would indicate, you're going to have a mass influx of people that might involve some extremists come into Parliament, and they will bring in policies that may also cause disorder. So I think it's in the interests of Labour MPs and the Labour Party especially, the writing's on the wall. If you don't do it, you're going to probably lose your job and have people in Parliament that you probably really don't want in.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong, but maybe not. But we're starting to see it in Northern Ireland. The real deep resentment, and it's coming. And let's not get there to that horrible situation. Sure. Let's take the proper steps now to protect this country and law-abiding citizens. And the idea that promoting and rewarding illegal criminals by giving them free accommodation in hotels with all the NHS backup that other normal citizens can't get is galling, and it's not right. And I think the groundswell of the British public is increasing of deep resentment over this. And Keir Starmer needs to really wake up, smell the coffee.
He certainly does. Andrew, thank you very much indeed for being on with us. Andrew England Kerr, his former MEP, of course. How will this pan out? We're going to get this press conference. I mean, it's almost embarrassing if what we are hearing is going to happen, this sort of one in, one out thing, maybe 50 migrants, because I don't even know where to begin on the stupidity of this. I mean, there's such a thing as politicians not reading the room. We're sort of used to that, right? Happens a lot. But this one is PhD level. I mean, this is in another stratosphere. There should be a book written about the lack of reading the room from Mr. Starmer. I don't know whether he thinks this is going to act as a deterrent. So if you come over to the UK, let's assume the one in, one out thing happens, you could be one of the ones that is out straight away. But it's not going to be all of you. You'd take the risk, wouldn't you? You'd really take the risk. The numbers are so big. Tens of thousands of people crossing the channel each year. Or 50 odd last year, looking to be, or even surpass that this year. So you go, do you know what? They're only going to get rid of, a total of a couple of thousand. Yeah, it's a lot. I'll take that. It's not going to be me. But it's not just that group of people arriving from now. There's the backlog from this year, and then the backlog from last year and the year before. There's all of those people, all of whom require deportation. None of that will happen. That's what needs to happen immediately. No one will do that. And what have we got? We've got the one in, the one out. And they're going to announce this with a straight face on the world stage in Downing Street, the most iconic political home of a leader anywhere. They're going to do this without blushing and go, yeah, we think this is really going to work. Because, Mr. Starmer, this is not just about deterrence. It won't be one, by the way, but let's assume it was. This is about numbers as well. I've never joined in with everyone's a rapist, everyone's here to rob you and blind you. That's the channel boats. Of course that isn't the case. But some people will be that, and we don't know who they are, which is why we don't allow people to jump over barriers at Heathrow Airport. We stop them, detain them, and usually jail them. Here, we house them and give them a mobile phone. You can't make it up. So it's just too many in terms of numbers, financially, morally, every way you look at it. And what are we going to get? One in, one out. Lenny is in Ashford. Lenny, what have you got for us, Len?
Well, lovely afternoon, Ian.
It's all right, isn't it?
Tickety-boo.
Very tickety-boo,
lovely,
yeah.
mate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, our problems with immigration is all self-inflicted.
Yep.
By Boris and Javid and Suella. Now, they are the three that are guilty. Now, Boris, over 1 million came in and he did nothing at all to stop it.
Nope.
Javid at the time, he laid the foundations for them crossing the channel, giving everybody a winning lottery ticket who succeeded. And that is our problem. And Suella spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on the Rwanda thing, took a lot longer, wasted loads of time, when, as a lawyer, she should have known the ECHR would have stopped what she was trying to do.
Yeah.
Now, that is the troubles we're in.
That is the troubles we're in. So you think this... I mean, as far as I can ascertain, Lenny, this has to get worse before it can get better, right?
Totally agree with you. Yeah, totally agree with you, Ian. I mean, from the start, there is 2 countries in Europe that haven't got the problems of the rest of us, and that is Poland and Hungary, because they went against everybody else's wishes, did what was right for the good of their country, and they've succeeded.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting press conference when they stand up and with a straight face. And, of course, I don't think it is 1 in, 1 out, isn't it? Isn't it 17 in and 1 out or something like that?
Well, knowing Starmer's negotiation skills, the one they give us will be pregnant.
Yeah.
So, you know, he is the most useless negotiator I have known in our politics since Chamberlain.
There it is. Listen, Lenny, thank you very much indeed for that. Don't go away, Patrick. I'm going to be with you shortly. Matthew in Sunderland, very cynical, reference our voice of doom, says, absolutely no way it's Paul Shannon. I'm glad that Jeremy Kyle is on next because we need a lie detector test as soon as possible. Now, 2 points to that. Number one, Jeremy Kyle isn't on next. It's actually Peter Cardwell because it's a Thursday. And the second point, it is Paul Shannon. Unless, who put this one together for it? I think it was Damien, wasn't it, that put this together? I've got a feeling. Wouldn't it be funny if he mucked it up and it wasn't Paul Shannon? I don't remember what Paul Shannon sounded like. So I think if you go to his Wikipedia page, there's usually a little, like, you can hear the voice of the person. Maybe we'll do that. We'll double check. But no, it is Paul Shannon, by the way. And one here from Pierre, says, now that Starmer's 17 in, 1 out deal is going ahead, can we expect the French police to stop their minimal efforts at stopping boat migrants on the French beaches? Says Pierre. Yeah, because they're doing so much at the moment. Details coming next. Back on the phones with you right here on Talk.
a former Tory party chairman is kind of unheard of. This is a guy that literally ran the Tory party, albeit it was over for a short amount of time. But he was a long-standing cabinet minister. He was, a very close ally of Boris Johnson, and he's. I don't like the word mainstream as such, but he was a sort of big fixture in the Conservative Party. This is some fringe person, so I think it's a really interesting sort of bellwether of where the right in this country is.
I do think those of us who care passionately and deeply
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
On that issue of junior doctors, Dario in Dartford says, suddenly occurred to me just how much previous governments have devalued medical professionals through private industry. Just for example, if the average is indeed 14 quid an hour, that's actually the same as a warehouse or driving job. Why spend 6 years studying for that? But I do think that the strikes are wrong right now. Good point, Dario, although I don't know what I keep hearing this figure as well, 14 quid an hour, which is why I mentioned it. I'm told, by the way, that it's not 14 quid an hour for very long. So come back in 5 years' time and your 14 quid an hour might be 50 quid an hour, whereas your warehouse or driving job will still be 14. I guess that's the answer. Phil says if there were compulsory drug tests for long-term unemployed with a 10% drop in what they get every time they failed the test, there would be more money to help genuine disabled people as at some point the long-term unemployed would have to get a job to afford their weed. Yeah, it's a fair point. Patrick's in Lancashire. On that issue of Macron and migration, Patrick, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
I'm involved in the UK fishing industry.
Okay.
And, our deal was already sort of done and dusted, wasn't it, before it came to light? Mm-hmm. And I just don't understand. Why can't we go, OK, we're 0.5% of the GDP in the UK, we understand that, but what the fishing rights mean to France far outweighs how we look at it, from our point of view. I think that when you look at the fact that there was talk of doing no deals in the UK with manufacturing arms, sending them into Europe, that's how much it means to France. If we turn around and said, listen, we stop the fishing boats if you do not stop the migrants. There's got to be some angle there that we can use that I just feel that Labour have just rolled over.
Why? I keep, every time that sort of comes up, Patrick, somebody goes, but then you'd have a diplomatic incident with France and then they would stop supplying us with stuff and then they would do this and then you'd end up with a war and it would be like a kind of trade war or something and it would, we'd end up, as would France, everybody ends up with a bloody nose, no one wins. I don't know if that's true. That seems to be the answer.
I don't think that's that true. I think we could have pushed them a damn sight more than we actually did, as opposed to just saying, take your next 12, 13 years and then we'll reassess it.
Mm. It's a bit like when we left the EU, when we left the EU, Patrick, and there was all this, the Brexit deal, leaving, and I thought, what is that? Why? Surely we're leaving and that's it. Just leave. We just somehow got to carve out, we can do this and we can do that and you can trade on this. It's like, that's a trade deal, that's a separate thing. But just leaving the EU seemed to come with all manner of convoluted rules and regulations.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
almost on purpose.
Quite cynically, we all believed that leave meant leave, didn't we?
Yeah.
When it didn't.
No. Funny times, Patrick. Thank you very much indeed. Rich says the whole point of Brexit was to take back control to our elected parliament from the unelected European Commission. Brexit failed, says Rich. Our parliament is now beholden to a small group of judges and lawyers. The next fight is to take back control from the unelected judiciary. If any political party prepared to take on that fight. I don't think we have fundamentally a problem with judges and lawyers. We just have a problem with some judges and lawyers. Overarchingly, the judiciary, we don't want to be political, and if it gets that way, it should be called into check. Simultaneously, we want it to be able to function free of any kind of influence of politics. We'd like to think so. Let's get a voice note. Here's Darren in Ashford.
Afternoon, Ian. Darren from Ashford. I think this is an absolute joke. Can't believe that he's even remotely thinking of doing anything like this. Just take away the fisheries and start turning them around. Stop them from getting to here. We've got, go and puncture the boats in there, in the French end. They're not doing it. Why can't we?
I like the parrot just giving a final tweet at the very, at the very end. Darren, thank you very much indeed for that. Another suggestion on the boat issue and the fishermen. Pete's in Sussex. On migration, Pete, what have you got for us?
Hi, Ian. Thanks for taking the call. Apart from the disgusting deal, I suppose, what you call it, with Macron today, finding out yesterday that Labour will not and have not attempted to smash any gangs because they can't legally, because they are still sitting on the policy to start the ball rolling.
Yeah.
That just infuriated me.
Well, yes, I mean, it seems more than that, Pete. It seems ridiculous because the people smuggling gangs, or smuggling Peter gangs, whatever he wants to call it, are already illegal, right? Both this country, France, Germany, anyone that caught, one of these kind of almost organised crime generals who are facilitating that and charging people thousands of pounds, all governments would arrest those. It's not like a Keir Starmer idea. It was just a phrase he jumped on, which is why he can't now show any evidence for it.
It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's a total insult to the public because he continually uses that phrase.
Yeah.
Well, we are smashing the gangs. We are smashing it.
Well, I wonder now whether... I thought I'd noticed over the last couple of weeks, Pete, that he's kind of stopped using it because he's realised that they aren't smashing any gangs, and now there's lots of questions on it.
No, he used it on Friday.
Did he use it Friday, did he?
He used it Friday, yeah.
So he's still... all right, so that's less... Yeah, so in the last week he's still been using it. He's still sticking with it.
What I feel, from just the general public and being a nobody, that he's seriously taking the mickey out of us.
I think so. I think there is... Well, there's no other conclusion, is there, really? Listen, Pete, thank you very much for that. You do get that sort of feeling. There are some people in life... when you look at Ben Fogle and you just have an irrational but an instinctive desire to kick the snot out of him, and you think, he's probably a really nice bloke, but there's something about him I just find perpetually annoying. Ben Fogle rowing across the pond and running up the flipping mountain, and oh God, I bet you got, but you got a story to tell about all that bit. But it's irrational, right? I recognise that. I recognise it's irrational, because we all have those moments. Some people have it with Stephen Mulhern. I understand it. But Keir Starmer takes that to another sort of level, because it's serious. I mean, Ben Fogle presents TV programmes and Stephen Mulhern presents TV programmes. It doesn't really matter in the grander scale. Prime Minister, it does matter. It really does matter what they're doing. So when they're inept or annoying, it's a little bit more serious stuff. And I think that's where we're at very much with Keir Starmer, even from some Labour supporters. 0344 499 1000. We will get that press conference happening very, very soon. It's Macron and Starmer together at the podium. Location, Downing Street, 3:30 Eastern Time. We'll bring you that right here live on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is always the same when you wait for these press conferences. I've seriously lost count of how many times. I know 100 times, whether it's whoever it is, you're waiting for a press conference. It's going to happen. Started off yesterday. This is how it works. So we're obviously in cahoots and dialogue, cahoots with the press people, so that you can make sure that you got the feed set up and all the rest of it. Yesterday it was 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, and you know when you're told that 3 o'clock, the first thing you know, if you've done this job long enough, is it will not be 3 o'clock. Okay, guaranteed, it won't be when they say it's going to be. And then by this morning, I'll be about 3:30, around about 3:30. 3:30, President Macron, Keir Starmer will speak together. Right, it's now 25 to 4, so that's probably not going to happen. It might come before 4, but I'm just confused by it. Like, make it happen, for God's sake. I don't really believe that Starmer and Macron are personally tete-a-tete, like thrashing out the final deal. Is 17 for 1? Oh, come on, Emmanuel, do us 15. Oh, you are a wag, Emmanuel. OK, I'll do you 50. I know where I'm going with these accents. You take I don't believe that's happening. So what's the deal? But they're not there yet. Tony is in Lincolnshire. Let's go back to the issue of benefits and the welfare system. Tony, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Hi, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, fire away.
I don't know where to start. Basically, I've been in the forces. I'm 60 years old. I'm disabled. I've got heart disease, kidney stage 4, disabled. I get the benefits. But out of my, what you call PIP, is my carer allowance, which is for somebody to come to my house every day for 58 quid for 15 minutes to make me a cup of coffee. And that's it every day.
Okay.
But the main thing is, my daughter, she's 23. She's done 3 hours work since she's been born, and she thinks it's hard work.
Right.
And she gets all the benefits. This is my daughter I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm dead against it. I get my benefits, and it's all paid out through care companies or...
Yeah. Did you say your daughter doesn't work at all, did you say, or only...
She's had a job, and she lasts 3 hours.
So she's only worked 3 hours in her life?
Her life.
Wow. And she's not your carer?
No, she's... apparently she's got mental ADHD or something like that.
Okay.
She's got a house, 2 bedrooms.
Wow.
And she had 2 kids, but they'd been taken off her.
Really?
Yes. And she's given... I'm sorry, but she doesn't deserve it.
No.
I've worked... I was born in Malaysia in the army, basically.
Okay.
So I've been in the forces until I did the Falklands. Did something naughty in the army, so I got dismissed. Basically, I smacked a colonel between the eyes, but, you know...
Yeah, never smack a colonel. I'm not making light of it, but you know what I mean, yeah, because you might end up walking the plank, and you clearly did.
I did, yes, and the plank was a very short plank.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you're seeing in your own family, I mean, that must... You sound as if you're quite detached from your daughter, literally. I mean, is that a cause of some sadness to you, Tony?
That's not the best. The best thing is I had an appointment for my kidneys to have an operation, and they cancelled it 7 times, and now the doctors are going on strike.
Yeah.
They've stopped my benefits altogether.
Sure.
So I get nothing, and they're changing me over to this UCO.
So you're about to lose out.
I've lost out. They're taking my mobility scooter off me.
Why?
Because
are you not ill enough for them or something?
No, this is the best bit. From the DWP, a qualified nurse sat in my house, looked at my records, and said, "Why the hell am I here?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Yeah, you deserve it."
Sure.
But the question I want to ask, national insurance. Okay, you'll get given a national insurance number.
Yeah.
And I've got a letter here from DWP saying, now we've stopped this, we will top up your national insurance. Well, hang on a minute, I've been paying that all my life. When I left the army, I went into the police force, and then I went to health and safety.
Yep.
And I had a nervous breakdown, divorce, and you name it. It's all sort of happened. Partly my fault, but then again, I've been paying in all my life.
I get it. You've paid in, and yet here you are when you've reached a stage in your life where you need to, put your chips in.
hours.
Yeah, well, she's done nothing, clearly. She worked 3 hours in her life. I mean, that's outrageous. Listen, I have to move, Tony, just to get more comments on, but sadly, you sit alongside many other examples of people in this very position, which feeds into what I said at the beginning of this programme. Everybody wants to help somebody like you, Tony. Maybe not your daughter, but somebody like yourself who genuinely has needs. We shouldn't be reducing what you have. In fact, we should be giving you as much help as possible, particularly your previous military career. I know it ended, with a smack and all the rest of it, but your police career too. That's how it should be. And people on the other end of the scale, you've cited in your own family, should not be the recipients of the same kind of benevolence or entitlement from the state. Tony, thank you for that. Let's go to Graham in Berkshire on benefits. Graham, what have you got for us? Hello.
Well, I mean, I was born with cerebral palsy, but I was lucky. It's affected the way I walk, and it could have been a lot worse. But without the car, I can't work.
Yeah.
I'm on every 3 years, I've been assessed to see if the cerebral palsy's got better.
What? The thing that doesn't get better, you've been assessed to see if it has got better?
Yeah, like your previous caller, I've had a nurse come out.
Yeah.
From a company called Atos.
Yeah.
Now, I'm exceptionally grateful for the car, but people have to remember that Motability is a leasing company. It takes money from the government that's paid direct over if you've got high-level PIP.
Yeah.
Now, you have to pay an upfront amount for most of the cars now, which at the end of the 3 years when the lease ends, you don't get any of it back. Yeah? Which is fine. Without the car, I don't work, so I need it. And I must admit, I've only ever been out of work for 4 years. I'm now 69. I've been 4 weeks. Is the worst I've been out of work for.
Wow.
And even then, I managed to get part-time work. But the government could actually improve the economy by saying we've got these 6,000 cars, a third of the fleet is changed every year.
Yep.
We give a better deal if the cars are built in the UK or up to over 50% built in the UK.
That would help. That provides a whole other industry, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, when I did work in an office, I had somebody with seasonal...
affective disorder.
Yeah. And we put in these daylight lighting, which helped her.
Right.
And cut down her absence by over half. Now, people with that in their own homes, that's practical rather than just money. And besides, as she said to me, when she's at work and she can get to work, she feels so much better. She's doing some, her mind is taken off everything.
Of course.
And the same with me. My late wife had depression, and it sort of gets transferred, really, when you're with somebody who's got late depression. And I found that work was an escape.
100%.
That sounds awful.
No, it doesn't sound awful. You know, respite is something, whether it comes through work or laying on a beach or going for a walk, it's absolutely key. Family members, you know, are completely, not just entitled, should be absolutely made to take moments away from a situation, whether it's in the workplace or elsewhere. Listen, I get it. Graham, thank you very much indeed for your call. It's lovely to speak with you. Thank you. I hope life is good now, despite the difficulties and the ups and downs that go with it. Interesting story on the mobility car too. We're not getting a lot out of Downing Street at the moment, this press conference. We're hearing our man down there has suggested that it's likely to be more like 4 o'clock. I said this earlier, didn't I? It ain't going to happen in our show. Other time, it depends. You know, you get press conferences meant to be at 1, they happen at 4, meant to be at 9 a.m, they happen at 2 p.m. I don't know who organises this stuff, but at the moment, it isn't happening until about 4. This one from Gary. The starting salary of a junior doctor, or as they like to be known, resident doctor, is $37,000, and that's before all the allowances they get for working unsociable hours or being on call, etc. So, using the BMA's claim that resident doctors only start at 14 quid an hour, they would need to be working around 12 hours a day, 5 days a week for 46 weeks a year. That's pretty much 7 in the morning till 8 at night, with an hour for lunch. How many junior doctors do you think do that every week, week in, week out? I love the calculations, Gary, when you do this, because it does work. You're right, £14 an hour, mate. Yeah, so you've taken the worst day or week any junior doctor ever had, and you've decided to translate that as the typical day of a junior doctor. It's pants, isn't it? It's absolutely criminal the way this lot are selling this one. They will kill people, mark my words. Ryan says, when is this government going to declare a national emergency on immigration and deploy the Army and the Navy to stop the boats and treat them as hostile invaders, as realistically this is the only solution? Plain and simple. Time is not on our side. We need action now. One here from Imogen in London who says, good afternoon, Ian. Starmer should do yet another U-turn and maybe try the Rwanda plan. It was a dire decision not to try it. We are spending millions on keeping these people here anyway. Yeah, I mean, could he really? I mean, can you imagine if he went for it and it worked? Then he's going to be in that really curious position. Wow. So the very thing we fought against, the very thing we attempted to, well, not just attempted, we overturned within almost breathtaking hours of getting into Downing Street. And they said it like, oh, the Rwanda scheme's gone, as if, like, the whole country went, yeah, we're right behind you, Keir, on this one, good man. And they just ditched it. There was no anything around it. And yet, you look at the Australian scheme, and I know it's not quite the same thing as they try to tackle boats, but it's in the ballpark. And certainly by using a third offshore processing is the first thing they do. So you don't get to come to Australia, you get to go to, I can't remember the name of the country now, but one of their lands where you are processed. From there, if it turns out you were trying it on, you go back to your country of origin. If it turns out you are genuinely an asylum seeker, you have the choice. You don't go to Australia, by the way. You never go to Australia. You either stay on that island or you go to one of the countries they've established. And it's that simple. And now they don't have any people crossing on boats. It's also that simple. 0344 499 1000. Peter Cardwell's here at 4. We'll talk to him shortly, and back to you right here on Talk, coming next.
No, and for the 2000 whatever that we are supposedly going to send back, are they not just going to fill those spaces, as it were, with another 2000? I mean, I really, really do not know what geniuses in Number 10 and the Foreign Office and the Cabinet Office have come up with this absolutely ludicrous scheme. Politically, it is a complete non-starter. How are they going to sell that to the voter?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 10 to 4. We are going to be crossing live to Downing Street. You can see there. This is the... no, it's not Downing Street, in fact. Oh, thanks for the info, Finn. It's the United Kingdom headquarters. There's clearly... Have you ever seen Downing Street looking like that? I don't know where, unless it's a part of Downing Street. That doesn't look like Anyway, the point is, there's two podiums, there's two flags. In fact, there's two... I don't know why there's there two Union Jacks. There's a French flag and there's an EU flag, because that's Macron. What? We've got two Union Jacks there. I have no idea where that is. Is that it's not the Home Office, I don't think. United Kingdom headquarters. There is definitely a word missing from that thing. Theo Usher will tell us. He's down there. We'll get the details. Or is it a different part of Downing Street we've never seen, where they've badged it up at the... where is the dance taking place? Oh, it's in the United Kingdom headquarters room. Maybe it's the name or something. Paul's in Tyneside. What's going on, Paul? What have you got for us?
Yeah, I'd just like to put forward the point, okay, so small businesses out there, they're getting decisions made for them by the government without any sort of comeback to the government. For example, the minimum wage.
Yep.
You know, when the minimum wage goes up, so does benefits. There's no aspiration to come off benefits because it goes up.
Yeah.
You know, so from experience, so take a nursery, for instance. So you've got nursery nurses on minimum wage because the fees you can charge in your area dictate that that's all you can charge.
Of course.
The government funding, which tops up for the free education and childcare, okay, that comes in, and that helps towards the wage. Now, first of all, the government, okay, will give the local authority the money. That gets divvied up, and when it comes out to us, we're getting an extra 7 pence per hour per child. 7 pence.
Wow, are you going away on that?
Oh, absolutely. And yet, when you look across the board, so you've got nursery nurses who have to have SEND, safeguarding, paediatric first aid, all these different qualifications, and they've got to maintain them. And then you've got the cleaner who comes in, who does a good job, and it's a relevant job. But the cleaner comes in, where's the aspiration for the nursery nurses not to look left and right and go, well, actually, you know what? I could do that. You know, and as the minimum wage goes up, there's no consultation to the businesses. Can you afford that? There's nothing from the government.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost as if the government don't know what the heck they're doing, Paul, right?
Well, we already know that. I mean, I'm in the northeast, okay, and the amount of people who I know who would have voted Labour, and, you know, historically, my dad voted Labour, you know, they're not anymore. They've had enough.
I think, this is going to be the most seismic change we've had in typical voting intentions. I know it's happened with Boris Johnson, when a lot of people in areas voted for Boris who wouldn't have done before, but this is going to be bigger. Paul, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll talk to Peter Cardwell shortly. This will be Georgina down in London. Georgina, what do you think? Good afternoon.
I can't really tell you what I think on air, but I mean, firstly, I'd like to say, what in the Dick Turpin is Starmer doing, rolling out a red carpet and whining and dining Macron and his entourage at our expense, might I add, who flipped our country over, Ian, to the tune of £771 million and given us nothing in return for our money. That's not a friend or an ally. In my book, that's a problem child.
That's your mate. Yeah, that's meant to be your mate, your best friend, it's meant to be.
Do me a favour. I mean, come on. Do I have to go to number 10 myself to hold Starmer's hand whilst telling him the political facts of life that'll help and not hinder the economic growth of our country, as what he's doing is both totally incompetent and financially suicidal for us all? They keep telling us that these fighting age waifs and strays from backwaters of third world countries will be beneficial to our economy. Well, if that's the case, keep them in France. Let them be beneficial to you. You're saying the doctors, scientists, etc., when in reality, most of them, only a short while ago, were in the remote villages of Eritrea, farming the land and ploughing the earth up with the pelvic bone of a gazelle. The people are here, they're not here to help us. Don't laugh, I'm being serious.
I love. You've created a beautiful image in my head, Georgina. I have to run because time is upon us. Yes, it's not Downing Street, but we think it's a military headquarters in northwest London, in Northwood. Peter Cardwell.
It is indeed Northwood. That's where it is. Yeah, and we'll start in a few minutes' time.
I've never heard a press conference just called Northwood.
Northwood.
I mean, where's the detail on it? Like, what is it? What's the significance?
Also, when it says United Kingdom headquarters.
I know it says United Kingdom.
I don't know the headquarters of the United Kingdom.
I've got to the ripe old
Northwood.
age. I've got to the ripe old age of 33, and I didn't know that we had a United Kingdom headquarters.
I don't know, there was a headquarters, that it was in Northwood. I don't think I've ever been to Northwood. I was meant to go today, but then the press conference was too late, and then, of course, I'm presenting the programme, so there we are. A little less snug and cosy than our chat yesterday.
It was very nice yesterday. It's the first time I've sat on your lap, Peter, for in work at least.
You're only human, really.
I've done it. You know. Because we've broadcast together in lots of capacities over the years, but we were very snugly put side by side.
Yeah.
Like it was like, when you see a couple in a restaurant that aren't sitting opposite each other. And you think, why are you sitting side by side? That's just weird.
Bit weird, yeah.
Because it's not conducive with having a chin wag, right? It's just sitting there and then having to look to the side.
There's no room to wag your chin.
There's no room to wag anything. So, but And then yesterday...
You found the tone, you lowered it.
We always end up on a carry-on movie set.
Carry on up the Ian Collins.
Yeah,
yes,
indeed.
Carry on up the Collins.
What is happening after?
Well, we will take some of the press conference when they finally get there.
Where is that press conference, Peter? Is it in Northwood?
It is in Northwood,
What, at
yes.
the United Kingdom headquarters?
There's a man standing there.